Okay, it says we are live, so welcome everyone to this kind of impromptu response. Wasn't too sure if I'd make it because I had pretty bad heart palpitations last night, but I'm still alive. So just in terms of announcements, tomorrow, all things working out, I will be finishing the debate review with Chandler tomorrow. The debate review of his debate with a Calvinist we started 3 weeks ago. Um, we may or may not have Travis Anderson joining us again, but we will hopefully finish that. Of course, like the next weekend after that, he's a journal conference, so that'll be fun. Um, you know, so the reason why we're doing this is because I've actually titled this "Live Reacting to the Most Deceptive Roman Catholic Apologist" on the topic of Mormonism. I'm not going to pull any punches. This is about Joe Heschmeyer. Heschmeyer is not low IQ, but he acts frankly retarded when it comes to Mormonism. I'm not going to hold back. Joe studied in the Angelicum. He's a former Roman Catholic deacon. He has proper training. He should know how to interact fairly with an opposing perspective. But it seems like he's coping and seething after he got embarrassed by Jacob Hansen in the debate a few months ago. That's how I'm going to say it. So I haven't actually seen this video, but I live reacted to his debate against Jacob Hansen, and I think I kind of demonstrated, even off the top of my head, he doesn't understand ecclesiastical history. For instance, his abuse of Book 3 of Against Heresies by Irenaeus on the convenire issue and all that other topics kind of shows. He knows what the arguments are, but he plays fast and loose with the data to fool his audience. So I'm sure we'll have that with this video. I don't have you actually? I think you've said you've watched some of this, Thomas. Maybe he's stuff with Chandler, our mutual friend.
Yeah, our mutual friend Chandler, who goes by Restored Truth online, I watched that portion. I was more excited for him. We have a group chat on TikTok, and I was like, people were like, "Oh, you've made it on the Daily Wire, like you're in the big leagues, Chuck." But no, I haven't watched any of his responses to Jacob, so this will
Cool.
be mostly new for me too.
Yeah. Now, I think I'm going to go like into autistic theological mode in the first few seconds because they mentioned polygamy. So let's kind of deal. So let's kind of deal with the absolute divine simplicity in polygamy and spend like a few minutes on the first few seconds, and then do normal person stuff after that. So, but yeah. So I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully I'll do this properly because I am a boomer at heart, not just in health these days now. Screen two, share sound.
See, that's the
Someone
secret,
says,
Robert. If you stop being a boomer with technological things, your health will reflect that.
"Oh, I won't be at risk at strokes because of my tin blood and all that chat anymore."
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. Oh, Michael Cetera's joining us. Awesome. You know Michael, right? Tom.
I've seen him around. We've never spoken personally.
Hi,
Hey,
Michael.
Tom.
Hey,
Hey, Robert.
Michael.
By the way,
Hey.
Michael, have you
Yeah.
actually seen this? Have you seen this yet?
Yes, I watched it shortly after it dropped. Ugh.
Okay. I haven't seen it except for the opening statement where he discusses
Hmm.
polygamy. So,
Uh-huh.
on a scale of 0 to 10, how S word is it?
Oh, how S word. I was about ready to give it a half a star. It turned it up to 11, man.
Yeah.
Turn it up to 11.
I
It's
actually
bad.
invited Jacob Hansen to join, and he said he would, but he's traveling with his
Oh, okay.
family. But apparently, it's Joe coping and seating because he lost the debate. And I agree with him. Like, I'm
That's it.
critical of Jacob's argumentation in the debate, and anyone who's seen my reviews on the channel will see I was critical of Jacob on a number of occasions, but
Mhm.
Joe embarrassed himself. And here again, Joe is a graduate of the Pontificum, the Angelicum, I should say, in Rome, from what I've been told. And I have a number of friends, including Roman Catholic priests, who are friends of mine. Yes, I'm actually friends with some Catholic priests who went there. So, it's top of the top. So
It's supposed to be. Yeah. Huh.
I think the term BS artist kind of sums up. For those who are wondering about
Yeah.
the accents, Amadal means idiot or fool in Irish. That's if you're wondering
Oh, that's awesome.
why I told that.
That's awesome.
Uh,
I
the, the-
mean, just as a brief before you get into it. So it starts
yeah,
off, they go after Jacob with something that he wasn't thinking that he was responding to something he wasn't. He was responding to something else. And then they go after Jacob with something else. And then they bring up the God makers. And then they use Hayden. And so there's like 4 clips that they are discussing, but they don't discuss any of it in proper context, and they don't really give any reason why. Yeah, obviously they use God makers. Like it's going to be lowbrow, but they
Yeah,
don't
see, I
No,
didn't
really.
know that.
do they actually give credit to the God makers? Do they realize like it's absolute BS?
Uh, no. Well, they probably do give credit to him. I can't remember what he says exactly. Like
Okay.
he's like, yeah, well, this is a great way to understand some of their beliefs, and it's like the most heinous like parts that we, if you've seen the God makers, so you know what I mean, like some of the most
Oh,
heinous parts.
anyone who's done LDS apologetics has seen the God makers. Now, I've
Yeah.
seen the entire one. To this
Mhm.
day, I remember how much I paid for it. It was like a VCR tape back in 2004 in Veritas in Dublin, in Abbey
That's,
Street. And it was 28 euro, about 30 something dollars. And I remember watching this like, wow, this was even crappier than I thought it would be. So
yeah,
it's not just
yeah,
the cartoon, but
right.
I've also read the book that he did with Dave Hunt, who was
Mm-hmm.
nuts. Even on the topic of Catholicism, Dave Hunt was nuts.
Oh yeah.
So that's his all.
I
Okay,
just love that the
so
God makers guys hate Catholics, and yet, you know, I mean, that doesn't bar them from using it, but it's just kind of ironic.
yeah, I mean, like in of itself, that's not like a fault. Like just because someone,
Yeah,
for instance, like if Joe were to borrow an argument from James White, who's no friend of Roman Catholicism,
yeah,
it would be a genetic fallacy for me to claim like, well, you can't use him because he's a Reformed Baptist or what
right.
have you. But
Yeah.
it should give you caution because like, although Hunt was not involved in the movie The God Makers, Hunt did write like say the atrocious book A Woman Rides the Beast, which is one of the worst recent-ish like early 90s work against Roman Catholicism.
Yeah.
So
Okay. I
yeah.
didn't know he was involved with the video. So anyway, all right.
No, Hunt was involved with the book, but it
Just
was
the
like
book.
Dick Bear was the fellow who did it with Ed Decker. He was the former
Okay.
Mormons for Christ fellow or something like that. So
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
All right.
Well, they're all dead and in hell, so that's
Yeah.
fine.
They get to be cleansed. It's okay.
Hey, why is Michael Quinn and Pol Pot here? Okay, I'm going to apologize in advance. I think I know where they're going to go with the whole polygamy thing. Like, say, well, God did not command polygamy in the Old Testament, or He only tolerated it. So, if that's the case, I'm going
Oh
to
no,
be a
it's
little.
actually a different angle. Like, um, I'll let you I'll let you live react, but it's
Okay,
actually a slightly different angle. Yeah,
it'd probably even be worse. But okay,
it is worse.
It's simple. If a guy had more than one wife,
can you guys hear that?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
we can hear.
he can't be a prophet. How many wives did the prophet Jacob have?
But someone using their authority as prophet to sexually exploit teenage women is showing a pattern of abuse and dishonesty that is something.
No,
Told you
there
it's
was no
worse.
abuse of women. Sarah Kimball was actually sealed in front of her parents. That letter that your retarded friend Cameron Bertucci was obsessed about for like an entire week was addressed not just to the plural wife, but also to her friggin' parents. And when it come, and also Fanny Alger was in the ward of the family, and the care of the Smith family.
Mhm.
That's Don Bradley, who's an LDS scholar. Of course, you haven't read him, Jake. Joe. And also,
Yeah.
guess who also says this? A critic of the church, Christopher Smith, who has never been LDS. He was a Pentecostal, now he's an atheist. But he and Bradley co-wrote an article on that topic in the series of essays that came out just over a year and a half ago by Signature Books, published. Who was the editor? Cheryl Bruno was the editor. So
Oh, that one. What? Oh, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I know.
really,
That was a weird book.
surprisingly really good book.
Yeah, it was weird though, because like, when I watched them talking about it in interviews, so I never finished the book. Like half the people were very anti, but it doesn't mean the book was bad. I was just like, oh, like these people have a perspective here, but
It was much
it
better
does.
than I would be, and those two essays were really good, especially on the dating Fanny Alger to 1836, but
Mhm,
also the one with Christopher Smith showing like, no, Fanny was in the ward of the Smith family. It wasn't
mhm.
coercive. The very fact she left without any resistance, And the barn story is probably a fabrication, based on what we actually know about the construction of the area as well.
Yeah.
There's loads of things, but no, that's absolute BS. Here's the thing where polygamy actually refutes Roman Catholicism. So, autistic mode. The Roman Catholicism believes not just in simply divine simplicity, but something that's called absolute divine simplicity.
Right.
So the Eastern Orthodox believe in divine simplicity. God, in his essential being, has no parts. He's simple. Not simple as in stupid, but simple as in no composition. Okay?
Right.
However, they do believe, like, say, his attributes can be distinguished from one another. Yes, God has the attribute of, like, say, being a creator, but his being creator is not one-to-one numerically identical to, like, say, his attribute or characteristics of love or anger and so forth. However, Roman Catholicism at the Fourth Lateran Council, and let me just pop this up here because unlike Joe, who lies through his teeth and never provides sources, this is the fourth session, this is the Fourth Lateran Council. We condemn, therefore, and we disapprove of the treatise or tract which Abbot Joachim published against Master Peter Lombard on the unity or essence of the Trinity. And it kind of goes on. This is from Denzinger. Fourth Lateran not only accepts what's called absolute divine simplicity, but the identity thesis of Peter Lombard. And, if you want a good exposition on this, distinction 8 and 9 in volume 1 of the 4-volume translation of Lombard's sentences. And this is not just a distinction or an essay by the editor or translator. This is actually from Lombard himself. So if you want like a greater exposition, go nuts and read Peter Lombard. The thing is, like, this means like God's attribute of, say, creation is numerically identical to his being. All his characteristics are numerically identical to his being. At least the Eastern Orthodox, with the energy essence distinction and Palinism, you don't have that. So this means that God in the Old Testament, from a Roman Catholic or Thomistic Lombardian perspective, from the very essence of his being, allowed or tolerated or even commanded something that in their moral theology is actually intrinsically evil. So square that circle if you want. So,
right. God is love.
Yeah.
I mean, he is, but
now here's the thing, like, that's probably a little too over the head for, like, say, Joe's intended audience, where like Mormons are bad. By the way, for like the best treatments on, like, say, Joseph Smith's Polygamy, Don Bradley, and non-LDS treatment, Christopher Smith. If you want like a critical perspective, Todd Compton's probably the best, but like also like, say, the 3-volume Joseph Smith's Polygamy, in comparison to like absolute BS, I think we're going to get from lying Joe, because Joe, you're a liar. So that's 15 seconds in and I'm already triggered.
Oh no, it's terrible.
But if you're conflating that with, oh, you just think polygamy is bad, I think you're missing a critique.
In your theology, Joe, polygamy is intrinsically evil and immoral, yet your God, who's absolutely divinely simple, allowed, tolerated, and even commanded it. And we also do know David, according to the prophet Nathan, who condemned him for Uriah and Bathsheba, that incident, said God gave you all his your previous king's master's wives. So that's something like you just did it in spite of it, but and that's why a number of scholars who have written on polygamy said this is evidence of God not simply tolerating, but even in some instances allowing for and commanding positively plural marriage. Now, I know like the response will be, well, Deuteronomy 17:17, but if you look at the Hebrew, that verb is not a lineal increase in wives, because it's talking about, like, say, it's actually talking about an exponential growth in the number of horses, gold, precious things, and wives, which are all grouped together in one. Even at, like, say, Jewish interpreters in the medieval period, I don't know why this is on me, saying like the maximum number of wives you can have based on Deuteronomy 17 is actually 18. So why the heck is this zooming in on?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't mind the view. Handsome guy.
I was going to bring that up, Robert. The verse you're referring to, it's in 2 Samuel verse 8, or 12, chapter 12, verse 8. Yeah. So, I mean, you have God telling David that his master, like, he gave his master's wives and imparted them into his bosom. So there's no real way to kind of sidestep that if you're just taking like the plain blunt meaning of the text. Like, God is condoning polygamy in the Old Testament.
Yeah, by the way, shout out to LDS Confidence Christ, who says Joe is a soft-bellied pirate a la Travis Anderson. Can't be surprised he kicks back talking pot shots to cheer himself up. What's up also to Jacob Mayberry, who's a great guy, who's done great work on the issue of like cults and mental health issues. let's see, Shimpy Shimp. Joe has been full spiral mode ever since he beclowned himself in the Hanson debate. He showed up known what the Great Apostasy even was. Yeah, I can't help like think though, because Joe he's not low IQ. This has to be like deliberate and deceptive. I can't understand, like, say, maybe, like, if this was, like, say, a teenager Roman Catholic who didn't know much about Mormonism, did a 10-second Google search, and said something off the top of his head, off the cuff, doing, like, a live stream, which was, like, cringe. It's like, okay, I'll show you a lot of grace. This, though, it's deliberate. It's on a very popular platform, the Daily Wire, another very popular platform, Matt Fradd's Pints with Aquinas. Yeah, I'm trying not to curse, but BS is the term, but yeah. Okay, well, we're 23 seconds in, so by this, we should be finished by my 50th birthday, if I survive long enough.
There you
so,
go.
By the way, I know loads of people don't like Matt Fradd, but, like, I have no problem with his book burning thing, because, like, I would burn this book and all other Alphonse Laguerre books, when we take over. So, it's only fair.
G'day, Joe Heschmeyer. How are you? I'm great. How are you? Could not be better. I could try, but I would be unsuccessful. Doing fantastic. Happy to hear it. So, producer Maria has several TikToks for us to look at, and the topic of the day. So you've maybe.
First of all, TikToks. I think the only good thing on TikTok is probably Jasmine Rapoli. Shout out to Jasmine. She'd actually be here, except she's on the flight. So, but Jasmine is great, and I know there's a few other people on TikToks, but when it comes to the reels, I think TikTok for the most part is absolute cancer, and I hope it gets nuked someday.
We'll see.
But at the same time, like, maybe it's just me, and I'm a boomer at heart. If you're gonna be relying just on TikTok stuff, most people have TikTok brain. Like, you only can say like things in like 10 or 20 seconds to get people's attention. You're going after low-hanging fruit. And even when you're kind of going after the best people, you're not going to go after, like, say, something substantial. So it seems like, why not, like, say, go after, like, say, an excerpt of, like, say, an interview between myself with Blake Oster, or like even Blake Oster's 2 parts with Jacob Hansen on the plurality of gods and the development of monotheism, or some other stuff like that. Why go after such low-hanging fruit? And it's like, again, Catholics are engaging in boundary maintenance, which is usually, like, say, what counter-cult Protestants engaging until recently. So,
They have their favorite.
I mean, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
I'll go real quick, Michael.
I was just going to say they have their favorite talking points, and that's what they did here. Was they said, what 4 things are like the most popular things to say against Mormons, and that's what they do. So anyway, sorry, Tom.
No, you're good. I'm assuming they want to. They're responding to this because they want something that's popular and in the public eye. But you don't have to go to TikTok. A nice little midpoint would be something like Don Bradley's interview with Let's Get Real with Stephen Jones, where you have an expert giving a lot more depth and time to a topic, but it's still like more in the public eye. It's still getting like a decent amount of views for a pro LDS page. I think going after something like that is a lot more logical.
But
so
by the way, I'm sorry, like, I have to say this, like, Kirill Elementary, who was on like a few, not too long ago, Joe does the Catholic Taqiyya, if you're familiar with that, in Islam. Justifiable line. So, yeah. I wouldn't even say this about, like, Trent Horn, who I have, like, serious issues with, because Trent strikes me as, like, a genuinely nice guy, and he's done a lot of good work and he does his best to keep up with criticisms of his perspective and Roman Catholicism, and also great work against, like, abortion. I've always given him credit for that. Joe, however, no redeeming qualities. So if do you gents have anything else to say before we kind of move on?
I just think you're gonna enjoy what happens, like, when you hear more of what he says about the polygamy thing after we watch it. Like, we heard the beginning where he says about the abuse. There's some other things he adds in there.
I was told by Jasmine he brings up section 101 from the 1835 Doctrine and Covenants.
At one point he does, yeah.
Okay.
They spend the most time on polygamy, so yeah, he goes into that a little bit and tries to talk about Oliver Cowdery and stuff. So
I'm wearing my Enatsir shirt. I should be wearing my polygamy shirt.
Nice.
So
you should be, but hey, hard to not like the Enatsir.
Yes, even have this. Yeah, it's like questions, complaints. We'd love to hear from you. Unless our nanny didn't shut up.
That's right.
Really self-conscious about the Mormonism thing. I can say Mormonism, can I not?
Yeah, I think
LDS.
Mormonism is the clearest way to say the thing.
LDS?
Yeah.
L-dogs?
L-dogs, yeah. People will not know what that means. But
No, right. All right, so let's just jump into it. So we'll look at the first TikTok.
Joseph Smith. Look, it's simple. If a guy had more than one
Okay, let me just say, like, I know this might be a minority perspective. I actually do like Jacob on a personal level. So, and he's really good at social media. So it's like,
Yeah.
I don't always agree with his arguments, but, against Roman Catholics, he's 2 for 0. So,
Yeah, well, he's hit 2 good home
How many
runs.
wives did the prophet Jacob have? Well, 4, but God was more tolerant of adultery back then. And how many wives?
by the way, go back to what I said about absolute divine simplicity and God allowing for polygamy or tolerating polygamy. It came from his nature, his being in, if you believe in ADS. Of course, like middle masturbation and eisegesis of Deuteronomy 17 goes here.
Wives did David have? A lot.
And the only ones that were condemned were Bathsheba. So keep that in mind.
So why was David only considered an adulterer with Bathsheba? Well, God, he
Oh, by the way, if someone's going to dispute that, read Chronicles, where the only thing David did wrong was the Bathsheba affair. Now, I think Chronicles is propaganda for the Davidic Empire and stuff like that. However, if you hold to the 4th session of the Council of Trent that teaches inerrancy of the autographs of the scriptures, and there's no meaningful variant in the Vulgate, which is the authentic translation of it. But then again, like, what would I know, having studied Roman Catholic theology for like 20 plus years.
cared about some adultery, but not all adultery. And according to Scripture, who gave David his wives? Then Nathan said to David, "The Lord, the God of Israel, says, I anointed you king of Israel. I gave you your master's house and his wives and the kingdoms of Israel and Judah." Okay, I get it. You Mormons just want to have more wives. Have you ever read the Book of Mormon? Wherefore, my brethren, hear me, and hearken unto the word of the Lord. For there shall not any man among you have, save it be, one wife, and concubines he shall have none. Okay, I'm confused right now. Maybe it's not as simple as you think.
I full-on thought he was going to say, dude, have you even had a wife? Why would he want multiple? I don't know. I misread that. So,
Dude, do you have a mother-in-law? Why do you want more?
Why would you want more? That's actually a better question.
have you ever heard anybody say he couldn't have been a prophet, or it's impossible to be a prophet and have multiple wives?
no, I'm not sure.
Funny enough, like some in the LDS community who are like now polygamy deniers have that view. Like polygamy is ick. A true prophet would not practice ick. Joseph Smith was not a polygamist. But yeah. But no, you do have some people who would argue like polygamy is intrinsically evil. God did not actually command it or allow it. It was like it's been condemned since Lamech because Lamech's polygamy was unsuccessful and caused controversy within his family. But yeah, let's just see if Joe can actually nuance it fairly and honestly. Luke Hansen just said he won't be able to join. By the way, Luke did a good job, on the Adam God stuff against Joe. It's kind of amazing. Like Joe will not interact with any LDS with degrees in theology, and yet he still gets pummeled. So
Yeah.
This is a real objection I've ever heard. Now, I would be interested if anyone wants to point to the comments of some critic of Mormonism who said, yeah, this is the reason. But I think that is a misunderstanding of the argument being made against Joseph Smith.
What's the argument being made?
The argument being made against Joseph Smith is that he is secretly practicing plural marriage while publicly denying that he's practicing plural marriage.
Joe has been corrected on that absolute BS, and he knows this. For instance, anyone who wants to understand, like, say, the so-called denials, this was published, and it's peer-reviewed, published in the Journal of Mormon History by none other than Brian Hales, who I doubt he's read as well. Denying the undeniable, examining early Mormon polygamy renunciations. Now, Jasmine and others did tell me he discussed section 101 from the 1835 Doctrine and Covenants. However, and there's like a very good discussion by Brian here of that and other denials. However, the LDS Church, which was always against the idea like Joseph was ever a polygamist, said that section 101 is actually not a denial of polygamy. It's a denial that women could actually have plural husbands, but there's enough wiggle room in the language of that section to actually allow men to have more than one wife. This is from a book by Davis, 1897, published by the LDS Church. The article on marriage, which I have quoted, this is pages 326 to 328. It's kind of apropos here. Was presented before a General Assembly at Kirtland, Ohio in August 17th, 1835. Keep in mind, at this time, the LDS denied Joseph was ever a polygamist and so forth. But even they acknowledged, yeah, this does kind of allow for polygamy. when read in a certain light, and by the action of that body became one of the articles of church government and was ordered printed as part of the Doctrine and Covenants of the Church. This article, i.e. Section 101 of the 1835 D&C, shows that at the early day of the Church had been charged with the crime of fornication and polygamy. The adoption and publication of this article in marriage was designed to serve the twofold purpose of refuting the charge of polygamy, and at the same time, counteract the influence of the Church upon the public mind. Upon its face, the article, especially that portion which includes the marriage ceremony, seems absolutely to prohibit polygamy, and yet, strange to say, especially from an LDS perspective here, this identical ceremony has been implied in every polygamous marriage performed in the Endowment House in Salt Lake City during the palmy days of Brigham Young, and in fact, by every other polygamous branch of the Mormon Church. Upon the surface, there seems to be no possible loophole to admit polygamy, but upon a careful examination, it will be seen that such is not the case. Let us examine the document a little more carefully. Why should all marriage be solemnized in a public meeting or a feast prepared for that purpose, which is also public? Clearly, it was for the purpose of creating the impression that no secret marriages ever had been or ever would be performed with the approval of the Church. All polygamous marriages up to that time of the Exodus to Utah were of necessity performed in secret in order to evade the punishment which the law of every state prescribed. Church clerks were to make a record of every marriage performed in the manner described, but of clandestine marriage he could make no record, not having legal knowledge that such marriage had been performed. And again, it kind of goes on and on. Again, you may have observed the ingenious phraseology of that part of the document, which is designed to convey the impression that the assembly, as well as the entire church, was opposed to polygamy, but which, as a matter of fact, leaves the way open for its introduction and practice. The language I refer to is this: we believe that one man shall have one wife, and one woman but one husband. Why use the restrictive adverb in the case of women and ingeniously omit it with reference to man? Why not imply the same form of words in one case as in the other? Of the woman they said she shall have but one husband, why not say of the man he shall have but one wife, except in the case of death when either is at liberty to marry again? We repeat the question with emphasis: why not restrict a man to one wife in the same manner that woman is restricted to one husband? The reason seems obvious. And this, again, is someone who denied Joseph was a polygamist. The church at this time, the LDS church, was absolutely opposed to polygamy. He thought it was a Brighamite idea. And yet, yeah, they admit, like, no, this is ingenious wording. And if you look at all the denials, and Brian has this, this is on his website as well. And I know Joe is familiar with this article. It's been pointed out to him. He kind of goes through it, like, at most are carefully worded denials of, like, certain abuses of polygamy, like, say, the practice of Bennett, where it's basically wife sharing, or wife swapping, and
spiritual wife agents.
Or because the church was not teaching it publicly, but only privately, it's not a public teaching of the church, which it was the case until October of 1852. They're carefully worded denials, but they're not lies or like deception, because Joseph was teaching it, and a number of people actually were familiar with it. So yeah.
So there's a point here.
There's no nuance here.
Oh, there's the nuance I like to bring up. That the point that I want to make here. And some people may have seen that I've argued this if they read things I post and whatnot, but in our covenantal language, we say that we will not be guile. We will not use guile, right? When you understand what guile is in an ethical standpoint, guile is where you lie with the intent of getting gain. And so when you might use guile, they might think that Joseph Smith is beguiling people by lying because, his gain is these extra wives. But when the reality is that this is like, if a Nazi were to knock on your door and ask if you're hiding Jews when they're in your basement or whatever, what do? You say no, obviously. And you're not beguiling anybody because you're protecting.
No. You see, St. Thomas Aquinas, pray for us, said it would be wrong to lie. Basically, a bunch of Thomas will say, like, no, you cannot say you don't have Jews.
I know. I know.
But let's not discuss, like, say, the whole making medals, for like exterminating the Protestants and like the whole Jewish stuff over the last couple of centuries,
Right.
Because the Pope was not rubbing his head, counterclockwise, on the new moon. So, and he wasn't saying Simon Says, so it's okay.
No, that's okay. So Catholics get to takia, if I said that right, but you don't get to preserve and protect innocent people by lying, you could say, even though it's not beguilement. even though the Lord commands non-beguiling forms of lies in Scripture.
Yeah, it's a bit off topic, but you should actually read Alphonsus degree on moral theology and ethics,
probably
and how he
should.
tries to like say when it's okay to like say things internally but not externally and stuff like that, and like how to get around certain things. It's amazing. Yeah. By the way, Jacob Ryder's here. Hi, man. Great to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you guys. Sorry,
Have you watched? Oh no, have you watched any of this before?
I watched about 15 minutes of it last night and wanted to throw up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, I feel that way whenever I hear anything from Joe these days. And here's the thing: like, I follow like a number of Catholic apologists like Trent Horn and Gary Mishuta, and I often disagree with them, but it's like, I actually do like hearing from them. Joe, though, anyway, this is on the whole polygamy thing, so feel free to chime in.
And to teenage girls, right? Included?
Yeah, exactly. And so right now, the Church of Jesus Christ.
Oh yeah, but when it comes to teenagers, again, Fanny Alger, look at Don Bradley, who's LDS, but also Chris Smith, who's never been LDS, and he's very critical of Mormonism. Their work on the topic, and when it comes to say Sarah Kimball, Sarah and Whitney Kimball, is that she was sealed in front of her parents, and that letter again, which Cameron Bertuzzi and others kind of was spazzing about a bit, that was actually addressed to her parents as well. So you never really hear that, because he's probably getting this from George D. Smith's dreadful Navu polygamy book, without actually having read like any of the relevant primary sources. JosephSmithPolygamy.com or MormonPolygamyDocuments.org for primary and secondary sources galore.
Latter-day Saints says that he got some kind of secret revelation as far back as 1831. But after this, there was a public denial that they were believing or practicing anything like this. And
again, if you listen to it, it's often like against the idea, like say John C. Bennett's plural wives idea, which is basically wives swapping and a host of other things, or that was like a public teaching of the entire church, which it wasn't, and that was true. Now, the idea like he had a revelation in 1831, that comes from like William Wines Phelps from 1861, but like as Claire Barris and others have shown, like in, again, the same polygamy book, there's like anachronisms in Phelps's letter and recollection to Brigham Young, so it's kind of iffy. The whole marry the American Indians text. But yeah, but there's still like discussions about polygamy in the early days, like some in 1835 was starting the church with like polygamy and fornication, which led, of course, to Section 101 in the 1835 D&C. So again, like there is a way to argue this and you wouldn't be critical, go ahead, but like at least show you've read the sources and so show some friggin' nuance, because this is the same level of retardation as saying like Catholics think Mary is more powerful than Jesus. And I could read out of actually, let me just this is in the context of visiting Jesus in the Eucharist. But visit Our Lady, oh most sweet and holy Mother Mary, how relieved do I not feel in my troubles, how console my worries, how strengthened in temptation when I think of you, not Jesus, and call on you, not Jesus, to help me. The saints were perfectly right in calling you, not Jesus, the shelter of those who are troubled, the consoler of the afflicted, the consolation of those who are in sorrow. My own Mary, not my own Jesus, console me. I realize I am weighted down with sin and surrounded by enemies. I have little virtue and am cold in my love of God. Do console me, oh Mother, not oh Jesus. And kind of goes on and on. And this is not the glories of Mary. This is a book on Eucharistic adoration, by the way. Really easy, if I could be a deceptive bastard like Joey is, to actually claim Mary is a deity and stuff like that. This is the same level of deception that would go into that. So, by the way, Jacob says, I would agree, which is why I think Jacob needs to elevate her best scholars on his channel more. It would force those channels to engage with them. He's starting to do it with Blake and Sam Shamoon, but needs to do it more. So, yeah. I don't know. Again, if it seems like I'm pissed off, I am because, like, this is tiring. I mean, Joe has been refuted time and time again by Jacob Hansen, Luke Hansen, and others, and he should know. But if you listen to like his interaction with Luke Hansen, Luke called him up on his arguments, like going to show like he wasn't familiar with like say a lot of these sources, and all he did was like all he could was like a very smug, oh, interesting. It's like you've been basically BSing people for like ages now on these topics, and all you have to do is respond with this kind of smug, oh interesting. Yeah. And again, I don't even think this about Trent Horn, who I'm very critical of, or others. It's just like Joe, I don't know what you guys think, but I do think Joe is purposely lying at this stage. So
Has to be. I agree. Has to be.
And,
Yeah,
in the 1835, I believe, edition of Doctrines and
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I mean, the only kind of, because you had said earlier in the call, Robert, you didn't think he had any redeeming qualities. The only thing I can really say positively is that he got in the arena with Jacob, and his recent conversation with Luke Hansen, like that's elevated him a little bit in my eyes, but it still doesn't excuse like anything in this video.
Covenants. There is Doctrines and Covenants 101, which includes an explicit denial that this is being taught. And then you have Doctrines and Covenants 1.
But we even have like or LDS critics of the Brighamite Church actually saying that's not the case, Joe. And if you actually read the sources, you would know that. So even if you do think Section 101 of the 1835 Doctrine and Covenants is a full-fledged denial in the same way, at least interact with that. It's called intellectual honesty. And I'm sure like when Gavin Ortland or William Webster or Eric Svensson or James White critiques Roman Catholicism, you would at least expect them to interact with your work or Carlo Broussard's work or historical works like Newman and Bellarmine. And even if they're not convinced by it, like at least nuance your argument or present a steelman version of it, then this absolute BS. But apparently, like when it comes to say Rome, there's one set of rules, but for everyone else, there's a different set of rules. And what does it say in the scriptures, which, let's face it, you don't give a crap about anyway, about unequal weights and measures?
Yeah.
32, that then announces a new revelation in, I believe, 1843, announcing this new practice of plural marriage, which we now know historically, 12 years earlier, he was secretly hooking up with women that he was telling them they were.
First of all, he was not secretly hooking up, you lying, deceptive prick. Now, and yes, I'm going to be very colourful in my language because, Joe, you're a freaking asshole. There's no two ways about this. By the way, for the others, don't worry, I'll be less colourful now. It's just like, I'm trying to get it out now, But the idea, like, say he was hooking up, first of all, when it comes to Fanny Alliger, again, have you actually read Don Bradley or Christopher Smith on the topic? More than likely, they were actually sealed together in 1836, maybe 1835. Like, Brian Hills is still a holdout on that. But he's not like hooking up with loads of people. In fact, it's not until the 1840s that he actually starts having a number of plural wives. Some of them were actually married, heavily pregnant at the time, and the husbands of some of them were like understood them to be eternally only sealings. Are you familiar with that nuance, Joe? Have you actually read Hills or even Todd Compton? Because even Compton has to admit some things in recent years as well. He's kind of reversed some of his positions, because he has intellectual honesty, which you don't. So yeah, it's really easy to like dump on Joseph Smith, but here's the very comforting thing, because we know this from Brigham Young. Absolutely every single person who lives in this dispensation, me, Michael, Tom, Jacob, even these two guys, guess who's going to be involved in their judgment when they die?
Joseph.
Yeah. Yeah.
And real quick, Robert, regarding Christopher Smith, is there a book or an article in an academic journal like you'd recommend reading first for those who are unfamiliar with his work?
He's done some work on, say, the Book of Abraham. Like he and Dan Vogel, I think, are the better critics of the Book of Abraham out there. Like he's some publications in the John Whitmer Historical Association Journal, but in the book that was edited like 2 years ago, came out about 2 years ago by Cheryl Bruno, by Signature Books. He actually has like 2 essays in that publication. One on Emma Smith and the similarities with how he courted her and their marriage with other marriages, but one he co-authored with Don Bradley. But he actually appeared on, heaven forbid, like the Mormon Discussions YouTube channel with Don Bradley discussing their work. So if you're looking for something free, but funny enough, like the book is overall good. I was shocked by how good it is, especially for a signature publication. And one person involved in the book who I'm not going to mention is absolutely nuts. And yet I was really surprised by how good that book was. So
that's why my comment earlier is what it was. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I think we all know who I think was nuts, but yeah.
Married to him, and that he was lying about this. I mean, there's no two ways around it. The issue is not.
There is. I think Brian Hills has actually shown they're not lies. He's just saying like it's not a practice full-fledged of the church, which is true. It wasn't until October 1852. But often he was denying, like, say, they were engaged in fornication, or basically the wife swapping of John Bennett. Again, read the article. And here's something like, it's obviously he's not read Brian Hills and others on these polygamy denials. Now, even if he's not convinced by Brian's argument or the argument of others, at least say like, well, one of the leading scholars who's looked at all the primary sources have argued blah, blah, blah. However, what he overlooks is this. And fair enough, like, I'd still disagree with you, but at least you're shown you actually know the sources and responses. This is piss poor. This is the equivalent of me saying like, well, the Bible says call no man father, and not acknowledging the context of Matthew 23, or not acknowledging, like, say, how Michel Pacwa or Carl Keating or Tim Staples or others have responded to that argument, which, by the way, I don't think is a good argument. It's just deceptive. It's like, well, the Bible says Jesus has brothers and sisters, but Rome doesn't teach that Jesus had brothers and sisters. It's like
kids from a previous marriage of Joseph's or something, right? Yeah.
Yeah, well, that Joe actually believes in Jerome's view, so but yeah, I mean, it's deceptive. At least present a nuanced perspective, show that you've read the sources. It's clear, like, if he has, he's very good at hiding it. So, any of you guys want to like chime in? And as I like from now on, I'll try my best to be less Irish or colorful in my language.
You're fine, Robert. I was going to say, if he is hiding it, there's no reason to do that. So the more reasonable explanation is just he just hasn't read anything.
Yeah, it's just like, it's really typically, I would just say, like, say ignorant. I'm usually like happy to like impute ignorance over deception to certain people, but when it comes to say someone like Joe Heschmeyer, it's really difficult. Personally, I think it's both, but
Not just that there was plural marriage or polygamy. The issue is he was using his authority as a prophet to engage in this practice. And Doctrines and Covenants 132 is remarkable because...
Oh, by the way, where's all the women? Because we do know, like, he wasn't firing blanks with his wife, Emma. And yet one of the arguments by the monogamy side, or the polygamy deniers, is like, where are all the children? And why are some of the... Because we know that he was sealed to some women who at the time were married to like non-members, and the non-members actually were okay with it because it was like eternity only sealings. It's a bit more complex than that, but like, again, look at the work of Hales and others on these issues. Where's the kids?
So I have something to say.
It's clearly not about libido, because again, like, as Don Bradley has shown, like, some of these women were heavily pregnant as well.
Right. Or old.
Yeah.
There were some very old.
And like in the case of, like, say, the Kimball girl who he was sealed to, after the sealing, the parents took her back.
Yeah, she's living at home. Right.
Yeah.
So when I was dating my wife and she was a student at ASU, she was in gender studies classes, which we all know suck. But she had to do it for part of her program. And I went in and I sat in the class because it's a lecture class and you're free reign. Like, I could have walked in any kind of class like that at ASU, probably still can. And I was just sitting there, and somehow the topic that day from this lesbian professor was about Mormon polygamy and the practice of contraceptives. And she was teaching that abortion was a common thing to hide polygamy among Mormons and all this. And so I'm not saying Joe's saying that, because he doesn't. He does not go there here. I don't know who else says that. I don't hear it a lot, so I don't know where it really comes from or why.
I think it comes from, like, the idea, like, say, John C. Bennett, who was allegedly considered Joseph's polygamy. He had training as a doctor, so he was like his secret abortion provider.
Oh, right. That's the fullness of it. Is he's the secret abortion doctor. That is correct. But it's like that's just not something that many people really say. I think because it's so ridiculous and out there. But
yeah, I mean, like, as much as I disagree with him, I've never heard Dan Vogel, to his credit, ever make that BS argument.
Right.
Or, like, I don't think Todd Compton has as well, to their credit. It seems like even the more careful critics, and to be fair, Joe doesn't, so, like, indirectly credit to him. At least I hope he doesn't make this argument. It's like, it's more like for shock value.
He doesn't do it here. Now, if he ends up adopting it because he watches this, that's very dishonest to him. Like, it's so outside the realm of reality and what can possibly be proven or taken as a valid point or narrative out of the historical documents and information we have. It's just, I have heard some of that as like the most off the wall thing to try to say, well, no, Joseph, he was being with all these women and that's what they were doing. He was just killing all the kids, which then you wonder why. I guess because they go west, then all of a sudden they're allowed to just birth all the kids. But if they were fine with abortion, why does Brigham have how many kids? 47 or something? I mean, why would he do that? Like, that's a lot of people to take care of. And, You know, it's wild to me. It doesn't make sense.
Okay, well, Thomas or Jacob, do you have anything to say? Because we're 4 minutes in, so like we'll get this done by the end of the year somehow.
Yeah.
Nothing further for me right now.
Okay.
I'm just really looking forward to the God Makers section of this.
Oh gosh. Yeah, we might have to skip a little bit of the polygamy stuff.
There is an explicit section in which what is allegedly God tells Emma, who, bear in mind, when she got married, took the same marriage promises anyone at the time would have taken, which includes an understanding of monogamy, that she is not allowed to divorce him or she will be damned.
Well, destroyed, but yeah. But here's the thing, like, if, first of all, we do actually have Old Testament examples of God actually commanding and allowing for, approvingly polygamy. So same thing to you, because like, although it's only a sacrament in the New Covenant Catholic theology, it's still part of like the natural order, in the Old Testament. So there's going to be problems with your moral theology here, Joe, if you're going to be critiquing it. So, Romanism doesn't get a pass here. But also, if it is God commanding and like she is knowingly going against God, that's damnation. And like, fun enough, in your theology, that's the case as well. If there's grave matter and it's serious, that's called a mortal sin.
Mm-hmm.
We
have cases,
and we do know, like, if you study Catholic theology, the vast majority of what Roman Catholics believe, especially when it comes to morals, is part of ordinary universal magisterium, not extraordinary. And there's a lot of things that actually on the books that would get you, well, basically under the condemnation of mortal sin. Yeah.
And God does destroy. I mean, whether or not you take it literally, Lot's wife turns into a pillar of salt. Ananias and his wife are unalived. It's not like unscriptural to have a kind of a blessing curse pronounced. Either you're going to be greatly blessed, or if you turn against it, you're going to be greatly cursed type of situation. That's like hyper biblical in my opinion, but okay.
Yeah, polygamy is stupid, but indulgences. I'm not sure if indulgence come up. I have to recall to, which is like the indulgence prayers from the Holy See. That's distributed by the keys of jurisdiction. So, but that's totally cool. Treasury of merit. Totally awesome belief. Catholicism is cool. Hello, I just want to say, love all the Mormons. I'm sorry people are mean to you. It's not really a case of us being mean. By the way, and again, hashtag not all Catholics. Like, I'm very good friends with loads of Roman Catholics, even Catholic priests, like especially Dominicans. It's just like, stop giving Joe Heschmeyer a platform. You guys should be able to like up the game. Oh yeah, and someone said like, I'm behind, but isn't every nun married? Well, sacramentally to Jesus is like, yeah.
Oh, I saw whoever is behind that making that argument in the chat on the video there. Nuns, they have a robe and a sash and a veil, and they're married and given a new name and all this stuff. And he's like, Anyway, I thought it was funny. The guy was proving some funny points there.
By the way, I'm sharing the image I would love to have for the episode, but I don't think I can. So,
no. Oh, I need to make it bigger. Hold it. Oh no! No, don't do it.
No, I won't. Even I think that's a little too mean.
Yeah, she's involved with these other women secretly. This was not something she was okay with or consented to. It's something he was.
No, she actually was okay with. She was actually schizophrenic about it, because she actually did give some plural wives to Joseph, and she even like engaged, like, say, the law of Sarah, like placing her hand on the plural wife. If you're familiar with, say, the liturgy of the time. But sometimes she did oppose it as well. She wasn't like always opposed to it. She wasn't always in favor of it. So again, this is naive and just simply false. And again, there is a way to argue this, but you can still do it intellectually, in an intellectually honest way, still be critical of Joseph Smith and polygamy, and yet do it fairly. So, yeah.
Caught doing and then claimed God had given him authorization to do. So you have to believe several things. Number one.
No, again, this is the whole, he's going in and out in terms of chronology. This is like the whole Fanny Alger thing. If you're looking for, like, say, a free online article, I help with the research of it. The Mormon article on Fanny Alger, and more recent up-to-date stuff. Again, Don Bradley and Christopher Smith. One's LDS, one has never been LDS. He's an atheist now, but Chris used to be very critical of the church, especially as a Pentecostal. So you guys should hang out with Joe. You will be friends. I know at this point I have respect for Joe, but I will happily debate him on the Immaculate Conception. I would love Joe to hang out with Trent. He seems like a really cool guy, and also Carlo Broussard, because he graduated from the best university of all time, the same one I went to. So,
one, if the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is correct now, that he believed he was being led by God to this as far back as 1831, that you have him publicly saying something to the contrary because it's convenient.
Nope. Again, everyone see the Brian Hales argument. Again, he's denying that like the church is basically engaged in wife swapping a la Bennett, because some of these accusations were Bennett is engaged in like say a type of celestial wife swapping, and that's not what the church is doing. Or two, it's a public teaching of the church, which it wasn't until October of 1852. And most are carefully worded denials, but they're not lies. And again, like there is some wiggle room even in these statements. For instance, one of them is, how he's been charged with adultery. But, if you look at the legal records, I only have one wife. That was actually true because all the other wives were not legal wives. They were just like religious,
ecclesiastical,
sealed wives.
Yeah.
So like he's just basically like, and he's also defending himself against the charge of adultery. And if you read like say committing adultery immediately after the publication of the Book of Mormon. So, again, they're carefully worded denials. But, and like, if you still want to say like, well, I still think that's unbecoming of the moral character of prophet, or I don't believe Section 132 is a legitimate revelation because reasons. Let's have that discussion. But
Right.
again, this is boundary maintenance of typical fundamentalist prosons. There's no two ways about it.
To not tell the full truth. This is at best, you could maybe say a half truth. It looks more like just an out and out lie. Now, the way I've heard Mormon apologists defend this is, well, nobody else was kind of doing this. Wasn't something being taught as a doctrine, but this was something he privately believed. That is a very neat.
No, that's a really half-assed way of explaining what's going on. Other people were involved in the practice. It was just kept private because of, like, say, the furor it would cause, especially in the outside community. But no, it's not like, say, he just personally practiced it. Again, no nuance, no understanding, like, say, anything like this. And it doesn't seem like, say, this is off the cuff. This seems to be like it's prepared because they're sitting down. He had to know what was coming up. It doesn't seem like any of these are coming to him on the fly. Unlike, say, how I'm interacting with this. I'm interacting with this fresh. So, and like this is bad because like if I can do this like off the cuff, this kind of shows like how poor his arguments are.
Kind of a way of getting around. Like, he was being criticized for this thing that they now admit he was doing. The reason the Navu Legion went in to shut down the local newspaper by force was because it was publicly saying that he was engaged in these sexually immoral practices.
No, it was seen as a public nuisance, and as Craig Foster and other historians who you have not read, we know this was actually a very common practice at the time to use like the local government to actually quash, and destroy the typeset of newspapers. So, and there's other issues as well, with William Law and other considerations, but yeah, kind of ignore the nuance of like Navu Expositor's destruction, which by the way has been discussed for decades. And guess who is one of the pioneering scholars about the destruction of Navu Expositor? Dallin Oaks.
Oh.
Do any of you guys have anything else you want to add to this? Because again,
I mean,
the lack
you
of
brought up
nuance,
William
lack of
Law.
understanding of like even the basic facts. This is just awful.
Right. I mean, you brought up William Law, and there's other context around why it's a nuisance, but you basically have, for those that may not know, you have people who are gathering together to make what we might call a secret combination. They're oathing to each other, to making an oath that they will kill Joseph Smith, and they're involved with this newspaper. And there's a number of them. There's a story of two young men that Joseph gets to into the meeting because they were invited to one. They tell Joseph what happened. And he says, "You need to keep going back and tell me what happens." And when they refuse to take the oath, they're miraculously saved. Yeah, I don't want to tell the whole story, but like we have their testimony, we have records from others that knew of these events. There are some serious things going on. And what they're doing with the paper is attempting to find a justification for why they're going to use mob violence to kill him, which they end up doing.
Yeah, but also like Joe, I'm not sure if he says this here, but like in the past, he's basically said, even after being corrected, like Joseph Smith died in a gun battle. Okay, so like 150, 200 people hellbound and killing you. You have a 6-shot pistol, and your brother has a 1-shot pistol, and apparently that's a gunfight. To quote Dr. Crane, what color is the universe? What color is the sky in your world, Joe?
It's the Catholics that actually said martyrs are allowed to fight back because they made martyrs of all the Crusaders.
Yeah, but they were Trinitarian, so.
Oh, right. Okay.
That's what the criticism is. It's not just some Old Testament prophets had multiple wives. We can get into the question.
Which God actually allowed, and this kind of refutes absolute divine simplicity, but let's not go there,
Whether we would regard Jacob or David as prophets. Certainly there are people who, in an earlier age, were led by God and were engaged in behavior that wasn't completely morally upright. That is not...
But these commands came from God's being because he believed in absolute divine simplicity, so right. God was actually commanding and allowing something that you think is intrinsically evil.
Yeah. Well, we'll wait till
your criticisms of Calvin...
Yeah,
so like basically your God is evil, and it's like because Thomism is fake and gay, but go ahead.
That's right. It is a mismatch
to them being prophets, but someone using their authority as prophet to sexually exploit teenage women or teenage.
He's just got to keep saying that line because it's useful to him.
Yeah. He's ignoring the fact, like say a certain institution is the largest shawled grape factory the world has ever known, which kind of shows like, there's no grace imparted to their priests when it comes to that. But, of course, like we'll be criticized for saying that.
When my mom was on her mission in Italy, of all places, she was one of the very early kind of missionaries. She was there about 8 years after it opened. And she was serving up in Florence. And I don't remember the names or anything. Maybe someone could try to find it. My mom was there like 77, 78. They found like a vat that they believed used to be used as like an acid bath because there was just a crap ton of fetal bones inside it at an abbey. Just saying.
Catholicism is cool. The difference between me and others is like I actually know both systems like the back of my hand. Oh, and but I have no problem with people being critical of my beliefs. It's just like lack of nuance. So and yeah, Thomism is fake and gay. So, but here's the thing: I can back that up reading Denzinger and the other sources like the Fourth Lateran Council.
Girls, right. And then lying about it is showing a pattern of abuse and dishonesty. That is something bigger than plural marriage. There is a difference. So if you're conflating that with, oh, you just think polygamy is bad, I think you missed the critique.
Destroyed.
Nope.
Next TikTok. Because TikTok runs the world now.
I mean, I get like say going after like say TikTok videos and like I'm not saying Jacob et al. Or low hanging fruit. Like you have to go after like say certain people with an audience, but like come on.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Ken also is cool. I can actually document like Joe is line trees teach, and he's not exactly being honest about Roman Catholic beliefs as well. So but if you want to show like where I'm wrong in by reading the Fourth Lateran Council or Peter Lombard, let me know. Until then, quit it with the piety signaling.
Now, I don't know if you saw this recently. It hit the news. There was a pastor with multiple wives. I think we're going to see this, right? More and more. Yeah. In fact, it'll be
base pastor.
Interesting if polygamy catches on in our society, if the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints will change their opinion yet again on this area. But what I wanted to say is they appeal to polygamy in the Old Testament to say, see, it's fine. And often Christians will say, okay, but it wasn't ever kind of commanded. It was merely permitted. But
Can also is cool. Digression 8 of Peter Lombard's Sentences, Volume 1, and Denzinger, Sources of Catholic Dogma. Sources of Catholic Dogma on the Fourth Lateran Council that dogmatized the Lombardian definition of the identity thesis. So, yeah. Oh, and by the way, I know the relevant languages as well. So, yeah. I'm just going to turn off the comments because, like, can we actually have intelligent Romanists here? Come on.
What he seems to be saying is that no, David was explicitly told to have multiple wives. True that he didn't.
Yeah, he was by Nathan the prophet, But let's kind of go into the
Say that. That
gymnastics.
scripture verse seems to have implied.
Yes, it's either 2 Kings 18 or 2 Samuel 18. It escapes me right now. And there's a particular context there where David is being rebuked by Nathan for the situation with Bathsheba. And one of the things he's being rebuked for is God has given him everything, including the kingdom and including the harem of Saul. That doesn't mean that God wanted him to sleep with all of those women. In fact, prior to that, we had seen.
But there's still his plural wives, and God gave them to him. Right? Right?
Well, wait for what he's going to say about David and also Jacob, who is Israel, here in 30 seconds or so.
And that a king is not to have more than one wife. That's actually explicitly in the Old Testament. Yet we know that the
No, it's not. Deuteronomy 17:17 is not about a king only having one wife. It's against an exponential increase in one wife. Want to know? The Hebrew, Rabbah, Resh, Bet, Hey. And ask Mitchell Pakwa, who's a Hebraist, about this. Because it's in the context of a king not multiplying to himself gold and silver and chariots and horses, as well as wives. Does that mean the king only had one chariot and one piece of gold? No, it's against exponential. And if you look at the reception history of this, even amongst Jews when they were against polygamy or not, at least not practicing it, and you can go on Sefaria.org, so don't worry, Joe, you don't have to like read a book for once. They often say like a king can actually have up to 18 wives based on this rule from Deuteronomy 17. But of course, you're not going to get this because he hasn't actually studied this, because it's basically what Mommy Magisterium tells me.
He also forgets to bring up Moses here, and I think that's important to understand before he says what he's going to say here in a second.
whole broader theological point to be made there, where when the Israelites want a king, they're told in no uncertain terms how corrupting a king is going to be, because the danger of kingship is that you start to rely on yourself and your own authority rather than relying on God. And yet when they push for it, God permits him to have a king and even raises up certain men as kings. But we see these men compromising morally in what they viewed at the time was, politically expedient or necessary. This isn't depicted as good. So when the harem of Saul is given to David, the point there isn't that God wants him to sleep with all of these women. God, through the prophet, said he gave them to him. He could have just he freed them. I mean, what could have? This is utter eisegesis on steroids. Yeah. But again, for a Roman Catholic, it's not about biblical exegesis. It's basically what Thomism says. Yeah. That is a misunderstanding of what is happening. Rather, this is a symbol of royal authority that is being given to David. A symbol of royal authority that shouldn't have existed in the first place, and that other parts of Scripture are very clear.
And again, in light of absolute divine simplicity, a Lombardian definition, which Fort Lateran dogmatized, by the way, this came from the being of God. So God is actually permitting something that's intrinsically evil, and that's coming from his being. So no matter how you cut it, you have problems as a Roman Catholic. But who cares about consistency, Joe?
You're on. And so Nathan's point is that even having all of this, that wasn't enough for David. He goes after Bathsheba as well. All now, where I think there's a quotation he gives from the Book of Mormon, which I believe is from Book of Jacob, chapter 2. And if you read Jacob 2, it explicitly says that David and Solomon having many wives and concubines was an abomination. But then...
Yeah, same language as Deuteronomy 17, exponential increase. But in verse 30, there's the allowance clause. I wonder if he addressed
when you read Doctrines and Covenants 132, it says that other than Bathsheba...
Oh, he skips over it. He doesn't read verse 30, which has, in terms of the reception history, always been used to show God does allow it in certain circumstances. Wow, how could you miss that? Because it's on the very same page of the current printing, Joe. It's only 3 verses later.
Someone researched it for him.
All of the wives that were given to David and Solomon were gifts from the Lord. So unless you believe that God gives abominations, it seems like there's a very clear contradiction there. So again, look, the critique...
No, it doesn't know what a contradiction is. Also, a very good study of this is actually Ryan Stevens' Polygamy in the Law of Moses, Lexington Books, 2024. Shout out to my friend Matthew Roper, who may be familiar with this. He basically defends the idea. I actually do have a transcription of this, so it might be fun to go through this. Here we go. Yeah, for instance, this is from his book. For instance, he notes, David had enough wives that keeping count of them is rather tricky. David's first wife was Saul's daughter, Michal. David's second wife appears to be the widow of Abigail, and it goes down in it. In all, David had 8 named wives and a number of other unnamed wives/concubines. Despite David's numerous wives, the text never once mentions David's polygamy in negative light. This is especially noteworthy when considering that the narrative does not shy away from highlighting David's moral failures. Even more instructive is that David described as a man after God's own heart, 1 Samuel 13:14, a description which is never reversed in spite of David's numerous sins. Most surprisingly is that the text states that David David's many wives are actually blessings from God. When David is confronted about his sin with Bathsheba, the prophet records God's rebuke. And that's 2 Samuel 12:8. The anti-polygamous Qumran community even desperately attempted to absolve David of his polygamy, claiming he was unaware of the law of Deuteronomy 17:17 because the law had been sealed in the Ark. And that's the Damascus document. And it kind of goes down. So again, I have a transcription here. He also interacts with Dupriest, who argues at length that the description of David as a man after God's own heart was only valid prior to David's polygamy. In support of this claim, Dupriest argues that David's story is told in cycles of servitude, supplication, salvation, solace, and sin. According to Dupriest, periods of solace are times when David apparently forgets about God. Dupriest's argument case is extremely weak. First, there is nothing in the text to suggest that they were periods of solace when somehow David was not right with God before he sinned with Bathsheba. Instead, the narrative reports nothing but blessings and protection from God toward David up until he sinned with Bathsheba, when he still had plural wives, by the way. Second, even after David's terrible sins in taking the Bathsheba, the text never implies a rift between God and David as it did with God and Saul. In short, the text never implies that David ceased to be a man after God's own heart. Again, the entire book is really good. And again, thanks to Matt Roper for making me familiar with it. In the recent Fair book on the Old Testament, Matt actually interacts with it with respect to polygamy in the Old Testament. So yeah, again, there's loads of considerations. These texts have been discussed by LDS apologists and scholars for decades now. It would be nice, like, say, well, at least some interaction, even if you disagree with the response to this. But again, to gloss over verse 30, when you actually mentioned Jacob 2:27, is disingenuous. I'm sorry, there's no two ways about it. So, you gents have anything to say before?
I was just looking up Matthew Roper's article a little bit here to see if there's anything else. I think you pretty much got it. I mean, yeah.
I wanted to point out that Joe's stating that like God is not condoning polygamy. He's kind of allowing like Israelite corruption.
By the way, we have an absolute retard claiming I'm a pseudo scholar. Lol, dude. Write a blog post or write an article with footnotes and get back to me. What a freaking retard! But yeah, it's always when the Caesarism is Lord.
I see him in Travis's comment section a lot. He's like that. But
oh, good. I can permanently ban him.
Joe glossed over how like Israelite is not just pushing for a king, quote unquote. Like the Davidic king is often referred to as like messianic or like an anointed one or like a son
Psalm
of God.
45.
Like, there's
and
an
Psalm
element
72.
of yeah.
Yeah, in fact, the Davidic king is like a type of Jesus. Like he's anointed, he's a priest after the order of Melchizedek, Psalm 110. The Davidic king is given like praise and worship when he's called God, Psalm 45 and Psalm 72. So it's not like, say, an afterthought, like, say, something iffy, if you will. But of course, that
right, it's like
the Old Testament.
From Joe's perspective, if this is like a case of Israelites are kind of like forcing God's hand, they're like pushing for the corruption. It's like why would God allow them to refer to the king with the concubines as messianic or anointed? That doesn't make any sense.
Is not. Plural marriage could never be taught. Like you could imagine a situation where God says, tomorrow I want everyone to be polygamist. We would have problems with that. That's not the problem I'm raising today.
Yeah, because according to Roman Catholic theology, polygamy is intrinsically evil.
You could have a situation where polygamy is tolerated because you're worried about other...
It's not like, say, a toleration, like, say, you might tolerate, like, say, some very liberal government policies to ensure, like, say, other more evil policies are not enacted, there's an entire debate, like, say, Catholic moral theology and ethics about that. The problem, though, is, like, one, polygamy in Roman Catholic theology is intrinsically evil. Two, even if you don't think it's intrinsically evil, but, like, it's unbecoming, again, in light of ADS, it's actually God's being who actually decrees it and orders it or allows it, and that's problematic for the Roman Catholic. And there's a host of other issues as well. So, yeah.
Moral faults first. Mm-hmm. This is part of the divine pedagogy. You don't solve every problem right away. You solve some problems as you go. All right, let's. Is that all right for me?
But the problem is, like, again, if you read, like, say, the scholarship, which I doubt Joe has, on the topic, it's not simply like, say, God tolerated this, like, say, how he tolerated, like, slavery, which is like a different kettle of fish. I'm not going to go into, like, say, where the Bible sanctions it and all that jazz. It does. But there's loads of considerations here, so.
On to the next one.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Oh, we have Jacob again. Let's see what he says.
I look at Christian history. Those people are they're the reason that I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
I believe the entire Christian tradition shows that Christianity is true because of the demonstrable fruits that came from the great Christian movement. I just believe when I look at that Christianity, something is missing.
And you even see this in the early church history when you have missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints going into England, and they begin to teach people who are like, this is it. We've been waiting for this. We've been waiting for this restoration, because they recognize that a reformation was not enough.
By the way, shout out to Brad because I worked with him. I'm not sure if you've ever seen him in the church movies when he had like a kick-ass beard, but he was like playing with either Ken Benjamin or one of his sons. So
yeah, he also did the one Escape from Germany.
Oh yeah, that as well. Yeah,
fascinating. And talking with people in Reformed Christianity, where I'm like, look at what we're really offering and what we really are bringing to you. This is not something that's just some out there thing. This is the restoration of the actual authority to act in God's name, because you recognize something went wrong along the way, right?
Right.
Yeah, and
well,
so
even Protestants will recognize something went wrong.
Oh, by the way, they're talking to. I'm Facebook friends with him. Well, Facebook Messenger friends. He's Irish German Lutheran guy. So that's the context. They're talking to like a dirty Protestant, basically.
So we're talking about the Great Apostasy in a way.
Yeah.
Where there's also the sort of alluded to the fruits argument.
Yes. There's
Jacob does love his fruit argument. I will grant him that. There's something to it, but like I think it needs to be nuanced whenever it's presented, at least in debate. So
a kind of argument that Mormon apologists will make, and have made at least as far back as Talmage, more than 100 years ago, where he'll argue, hey, look, here are all these Protestants who say there's something that gets corrupted, something that's lost. You even have Protestants in that age that speak explicitly of there being a great apostasy, and the church went into a dark age, and the church was destroyed from the earth.
I'm going to say something, with all due respect to Talmage, like he was relying on the same 19th century Protestant polemics against Roman Catholicism. And, as Ubi Petrus, the Eastern Orthodox apologist, who everyone should subscribe to, he's done really good stuff on the papacy. Protestants need that narrative of church history to be true, to show, like, say, the rot of Romanism was there very early on, and there was a dark age for, like, time immemorial that needed reformers to clean up, if you will. A lot of, like, LDS works on the Great Apostasy kind of borrow from that unfortunate reading, but, like, in recent decades with, like, Barry Bickmore and Noel Reynolds and John Gee, not to be confused with Paul Gee, but John Gee, the Egyptologist and expert in early Christianity, they're studying like original language sources like Menia and other sources, and doing a much better job at showing, like, say, the nature of early Christianity and its development. And I'm not sure, like, if Jake would just did this for the sake of the debate, or he actually does believe it. Like, the church, once it became apostate, is numerically identical with the Roman Catholic Church. I would actually dispute that. I think Roman Catholicism is like, it's a movement taught over centuries, and it's not identical numerically to the early church, even if you think, like, say, the Great Apostasy happened in so-and-so a year, and say the 2nd or 3rd century, because they did not believe in the de fide dogmas in their substance that you must believe as a Roman Catholic today, like the Immaculate Conception, icon veneration, and the Vatican I understanding of immediate universal jurisdiction of the singular Bishop of Rome and papal infallibility. But let's just see what Joe says here.
You take those claims seriously, then it stands to reason that a German monk like Luther or a French lawyer like Calvin doesn't have the divine authority to restore a church that Jesus Christ himself founded. That if
Yeah, but Joe seems, and again, this is like a fault for some LDS, like the church in 1517, when Luther purportedly nailed the 95 Theses, like where that event happened is debated, but he did produce a 95 Theses, was identical to like the 2nd century church, and that's the Roman Catholic Church, and that kind of has problems,
Jesus founded a church and it failed. A man-made restoration.
We don't believe it failed.
Right.
Again, using that logic, like Christ failed because he died.
Right.
I'm sorry, that's
Which
just
I've
stupid.
actually seen.
Yeah, like I think all 3 of you, unlike me, are lifelong LDS. Were you ever raised to believe that Jesus failed?
Nope.
No, I will say the first time I'd ever heard somebody who was a believing Christian make that argument was on my mission. And that was precisely the argument they used, that because he died, he was crucified, that means he failed the first time. That's why he has to come back a second time to do all the things he couldn't do because he was killed. they were kind of nuts. This is also the same person who told me that that Mormons are gearing up to take over the world because they have a president's office inside the Washington, D.C. temple. So that was fun too.
Yeah, and before like anyone says like my keys and stuff like that from Matthew 16, the Greek term means to prevail. And by analogy, and Harold Givens and others have argued, just as like death did not prevail over Jesus, the apostasy did not prevail over the true church, and neither failed. Maybe men using their free will failed, but we don't believe either Jesus failed by dying and having to be raised, if you will, and the church having to be resurrected like Christ. So
yeah.
Well, they'll segue into like saying that we believe that the church failed, and also accusing us of setting up Jesus as a liar.
Right.
Because Jesus said the gates of Hades wouldn't prevail against the church. I don't know if Joe's gonna take that point in this video, but we don't think Jesus was a liar either. It's just a straw man.
And speaking of lies, the Roman Catholic institution is built on lies such as the Isidorian decretals, and the donation of constants. But it's okay because my keys.
Restoration, in the sense of the Protestant Reformation, won't work. And so there were a lot of restorationist movements in the 19th century.
But that's true, like the Campbellites and one group I've done a lot of study in, the Christologians. So, restorationism was not like a unique thing to like LDS. So
Joseph Smith is one of many people trying to restore, because at the time, the 19th century frontier was filled with people preaching these contradictory, different denominational doctrines, and they obviously couldn't all be right. They could all be wrong. Smith concludes that they're all wrong, and that therefore a prophet is needed to restore the true church, and that he claims to be that prophet. So at least understand, I think, what the claim is. There's two problems. One is you have these promises made to the church that seem to preclude any kind of apostasy. Daniel.
And again, he pulls Daniel 2. Everyone look at the debate review I had. I would love to see Joe work through the Hebrew of Daniel 2 or the Septuagint to Daniel 2 and kind of ask, like, why did not Irenaeus and other early Christians like Hippolytus pick that up? And they did have a very high view, like, say, the church's integrity and indefectibility. So, but apparently, like, Blake Oster was sitting next to Luke Hansen doing the debate, and they were both laughing their asses off at Joe's like eisegesis. But everyone look at the debate review I had. I think it's in the first part. Was the one I did with you, Michael, back in December? Yeah, where we kind of went through like some of those texts. So, and also Joe is assuming that the early, let's just say there was no great apostasy. He's assuming that the church of the first century is numerically identical to the modern Roman Catholic institution. So, where's the substance of, say, the bodily assumption of Mary, icon veneration, Vatican I, understanding the papacy, and immediate universal jurisdiction, singularity of the Bishop of Rome, and a host of other issues that are now supposedly de fide? And before you pull the whole mod development, according to Rome, like the fourth session of the Council of Trent and other works as well, like those of Pius X and Pius XII, the deposit of faith stopped being added to. These are all part of the deposit of faith that have been faithfully passed on from generation to generation. So where's the evidence of them? And why are they contradicted in terms of their substance by the earliest strata of Christian texts that we have?
Yeah. Because
like if you look, if you guys actually watched the debate with Jacob Hansen, I did the audience Q&A a few days ago. It was really bad. He basically argued like, how dare you argue from silence? Although my argument from silence is better.
Yeah.
Two, about the kingdom being established that will never be destroyed. That seems to be clearly talking about the kingdom being built on earth during the time of the Roman Empire. Matthew 16, very famously. The promise in John 14 and John 16 that the Holy Spirit will guide us into the fullness of truth.
He's speaking to the disciples.
And Jesus' promise in Matthew 28 that he'll be with us always until the end of the age.
Speaking to the disciples.
All these promises that not only is there no clear prophecy, the whole church is going to fall away.
I would argue Revelation 12 and the woman going into wilderness. But here's the thing. So let's just say there's no text that explicitly teaches this. Really, you're gonna be a Roman Catholic will be arguing this? What is he assuming in that statement? One, sola scriptura, and two, the right to private interpretation. Because Roman Catholicism, with the exception of Matthew 16, for the Petrine supremacy and Petrine keys issue, have never actually infallibly interpreted those texts. I mean, where's the infallible interpretation of Daniel 2? Where's the magisterial extraordinary declaration about the exegesis of Daniel 2?
There seem to be these clear prophecies that won't happen, and the church will be led into the fullness of truth. And
keep in mind, for the Roman Catholic, what's clear is like basically what Rome has said to be dogma. Because like I would say, like it's really clear Mary was not a perpetual virgin. I think it's really clear from the Bible and the earliest patristic sources, Mary was not sinless. You know. But clear for them is basically what Mama Rome has basically told us. You know. Apart, like saying angelic greeting, that's clear Mary was immaculately conceived and free from personal sin. But Irenaeus basically impugned to her personal sin, and early Christians impugned to her personal sin. It's not tradition, you know. They were wrong.
In the comments, it was Sam Henninger. He was.
Then you couple that with
already
good spiritual fruit.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, Sam Henninger was preempting that point on the Immaculate Conception, because it's like, okay, so if Mary's Theotokos, then her mom should be Theotokos, and her mom's mom, it's an eternal regression of Theotokos through some line.
Well,
somewhere.
some medieval critics of the Immaculate Conception, who, to be fair, did believe she was free from personal sin, said like, well, you know, I think it was Saint Bernard said, well, you know, Mary had to be immaculately conceived, or she was immaculately conceived. Why not her mom, Saint Anne? And right. Going back in time as well, you know. And sometimes people argue like, well, it was fitting that the mother of Jesus would be immaculately conceived, and it's fitting that she would be kept from sin. You know, it's like you can argue from fittingness for a lot of things. I could argue from fittingness that it's proper that the church have 12 apostles out throughout the ages, you know, because it's fitting, you know. And like arguments from fittingness do not make dogma, even in the Catholic theology. Even typology cannot make dogma. It can be like a cherry on top. Like if you read Aquinas and others, it has to be either implicit or explicit in the deposit of faith for it to be elevated to a dogma. So,
as Rodney Stark points out in his book on the rise of Christianity, Christianity explodes in growth over these centuries. It doesn't look like a dying church after an apostasy.
For them, preaching wrong doctrine does not means it's dying as an institution, but that's false. I mean, look at Islam. You know, that's rising, and it's a false religion. Sorry, Dan Pearson, but for us, at least for me, and maybe you guys might disagree, it's not a case of like say, well, no, if an institution imbibes or accepts false teaching or falls away from the truth, numerically it will not grow, or like it will not do moral good externally, like hospitals and charities. That's not the case. You know, now it's often in spite of, not because of the teaching, but why do you think, like say, an explosion in the growth of, like, say, the early Christian movement means that there was no great apostasy? I mean, one of these things is not like the other.
Right. I mean, it's just a fallacy. The argument that you have to marry yourself to, if you're going to take that stance, is that truth corresponds with how popular something is. That's just not the case.
That's popular, yeah.
Is a visible, organized church that is spreading without...
Which did not operate under Vatican I ecclesiology. I'm just saying, you know.
Any help from the Roman Empire in the first 300 years. And this is a remarkable story that is very difficult to explain.
Although the emperor did actually call the first few ecumenical councils, not the Bishop of Rome. So,
if not for God's providential help. And it's hard to harmonize those facts with this idea that something has been lost in the sense that
appealing to God's providence is like, you know, I do believe in God's providence, you know, but at the same time, like saying, well, you know, it must be because of God's providence. Well, was it part of God's providence that, like, in 553 the Pope would be excommunicated? You know, would be in God's providence that, like, say, there would be, like, say, the Babylonian captivity of the church that gave further fuel to the fire of conciliarism in the 15th century. You know, if you're a Gallican in the 19th century, you would say yes. You know, again, it's like arguments from fittingness. What's the rule book? How could you actually defeat this? You know, it seems like you can't. There's no way to defeat it. You know, it's so malleable.
Church has fallen into an apostasy, has lost the keys, and has lost the priesthood, and it is shifting into doctrinal just chaos. Destroy.
No, you know, I believe Rome preaches a false gospel, but, you know, there's really good Roman Catholics, like loads of my family members and some of the priests I'm friends with, you know, and Rome has done a lot of good. Like, I don't believe that they're different. I don't believe that they're related to one another. You know, I'm sorry.
Yeah, they do a lot of good. There's a lot of great Catholic charities in the world.
You know, I don't know.
I'm not sure if you've heard how Peter Crave first got interested in Catholicism, but he was...
Oh, by the way, Peter Crave is really cool. He's exactly 50 years older than me, but he's done a lot of work against, like, unalive unborn children and stuff like that. Yeah.
A Calvinist at a college, and somebody explained it this way. And again, he's not talking about the Great Apostasy.
By the way, I think being a Catholic is better than being a Calvinist. I think it's a promotion. An olive branch to my Roman friends out there.
But this would be more of a Protestant understanding, I suppose. He would say, well, yes, Jesus Christ did establish a church, singular, and that church was like a great bark sailing across the oceans of time, but after a while, all sorts of pagan and non-biblical barnacles attached themselves to
like icon veneration and Marian veneration and the cult of the saints and a developing understanding, let's say, the singular privileges of the Bishop of Rome, backed up by forgeries that the modern Catholic institution accepts as forgeries, like the donation to Constantine and the Isidorian decretals, all of that. So, based
and indulgences.
Yep.
the ship, and it got to the point where the whole thing was about to sink. And so thank God for people like Martin Luther and Calvin who could come along, scrape the ship clean, and it could set sail again. And so Peter said to him, are you saying then that if I got into a time machine and went back to the 1st and 2nd centuries, I would feel more at home, more comfortable with Christians and Christian worship than a Catholic? And his professor said, that's exactly what I'm saying. So Peter went and read the Church Fathers and became a Catholic.
Yeah, one of the things
that's really common, but like if you actually read the patristics, and by the way, there's loads of good works on the patristics, but this is a good one. I'm actually, you can see this. It's
I can't
the Apostolic.
read
Michael Holmes. He's on one side you have the original language text, and on the other you have a very good scholarly translation thereof. It's a really good one. Ehrman also, as much as I disagree with Ehrman, he does know the Greek language very well, so his translation of the Apostolic Fathers is really good as well. But yes, the early Christians were not, like, say, proto-Calvinists. I mean, look at my stuff on justification and other considerations on baptism on that. I think, funny enough, like, Joe would actually have to agree with me. I do a good job on that. But, like, take Ignatius, because they love to abuse Ignatius. Ignatius does speak of an altar, but if you read the scholarship on Ignatius, including Young Man and other Roman Catholic scholars on Ignatius, Ignatius did not believe in a physical altar. It's like when the bread and wine come together, that's the Tusiatarian or altar of sacrifice. And there's other considerations as well. Look at my work on the Eucharistic sacrifice. And there's even, like, say, some German scholars who I've quoted, dirty liberals, arguing, like, say, the Didache is speaking only of spiritual sacrifices and other considerations as well. Let me actually get the reference. Bum, 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 bum. But there's like I'll get the references anyway. But oh yeah, Jens Schroeder, his work on the Didache. I have like the German transcribed and a machine translation because I don't know German on it. But he basically says, like, Ignatius of Antioch, for him the altar was not a physical altar. There's other considerations as well. It's been misread by loads of pop level Catholic apologists. Same when it comes to Justin. Like Irenaeus, for instance, in Book 4 of Against Heresies, believed in a form of consubstantiation, not transubstantiation, because, like, once the blessing or the invocation by the priest has been effected, there's two realities that still exist. That's not the case in Roman dogma, where once the priest says, this is my body, this is my blood, there's only one reality, that is the virtual presence of the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ. So there's loads of considerations, but I'm not saying, like, say, the early Christians were like proto-LDS, but they were not proto-Roman Catholic. They were not proto-Calvinist. One can, in context, be a Roman Catholic and use the Apostolic Fathers and the early Church Fathers on certain topics in context in support of their beliefs. We can do the same, and so can some Reformed as well, to a lesser extent, because there's no double predestination or double imputation ideas. But again, just be careful. Because this is like a very common trope, like, well, I read Church Fathers and they were so Catholic. Really? Icon veneration's there, Immaculate Conception of Mary's there, Augustinian Understanding of Original Sin is there. Really?
Like, if you read them over time, you'll see the shift, because you brought up like original sin. There was arguments they were having about how to baptize. So you have the Didache you can read, but like how to baptize, what should be the mode, and all this stuff, and what ages as well. They had those arguments. You can go read that stuff. So to to believe that, oh yeah, everything was totally copacetic to how it is now. I hope nobody ever tries to argue that. I don't know if that's what Joe's and Matt are really trying to get at here. I guess it was really Matt's point, but like, you, I guess they just count on their audience being too busy or too lazy to read. I don't know.
Yeah, because like even like Trent Horn and others are much more careful about like this.
Yeah.
So
Makes the LDS claim a little different is how early they have to put the Great Apostasy. So they will put it either in or immediately after the lifetime of the apostles, that the apostles die and they aren't being replaced. So you have to say that the church is breaking down structurally then. There might still be people of good faith. They're not going to deny that. But in terms of a visible structured church headed by apostles, when James dies in the early 40s, he's not replaced. When Peter dies, they understand Peter has a special authority. When he dies in the mid 60s, he's not replaced. When John dies, or maybe is taken up, if you believe that, in the year 100, he's not replaced. And so now there's nobody, and nobody panics about it. You don't find one writing where they say, we were supposed to have apostles forever, and we don't. You have a clear understanding of the exact opposite, that they think, like,
nice argument from Silence, Joe. Where are they teaching in their liturgy or elsewhere the bodily assumption of Mary as the apostolic teaching, or even teaching at all? Immaculate Conception, personal sinlessness of Mary, Vatican I understanding the papacy. Again, like when it comes to like these Roman Catholics and their argument from Silence, I mean, it bites you in the butt, dude. And here's the thing: you're the guys who are claiming these are de fide apostolic in origin teachings.
Well, it's weird because I can read, and I don't read in Greek. Maybe you can correct me, but does it not say that the church has a foundation of apostles?
Yeah, but the argument would be, well, once you lay the foundation, you don't dig it up and rebuild it. But
You
that
don't
kind of
keep
ignores like the
relaying the
metaphor.
foundation? Oh,
Like,
that's
if one is removed, of course you're going to replace the foundation. So I'm not saying like it's the best text to use, but like it could be read in an LDS friendly way without like butchering the text. So
yeah.
but let's show like say the importance of like the apostolic foundations of the of New Testament ecclesiology.
Well, it's
And
just
as I
why
said, like in the
the
audience
science.
Q&A, as I said, like doing the audience Q&A review I did with Curellum Theory,
Yeah.
John, the very fact that you have an explication in the very first chapter of Acts shows that's the normative practice. We're not told like say that's just like extraordinary. So when someone dies, in the case of like Judas unaliving himself, and his apostleship is replaced. If it stops at the 12, why even bother replacing it? This would be like a very good way to show like, oh no, it's after the ascension of Christ. We don't need 12 more apostles. It's going to die out. Really good way. But also you have like the Didache that has like disputes about like say whether the apostolic gifts will continue after the second or third generation, while at the same time like say there are true prophets and true apostles, showing like there's no clear cut answer to this in the community. At least that community that produced the Didache, because it's a composite document. And I date the Didache between 50 to 100. So I kind of know Jacob and Thomas have been a bit silent. You guys want to chime in anything?
No, I mean, I think we're gonna get to a few things that I will probably chime in on, but if we're because so much of this is just arguing from silence. If you are going to actually look at the text and what we do have, the only thing represented by any of these texts is a direct response to Judas's unaliving of himself to replace him. That's about the extent of it. And so if that's what we're going to go off of, then that sets sort of the pattern, the tone moving forward. Just because later authors are silent on the issue doesn't mean that wasn't something discussed. That doesn't mean it wasn't something that was considered during the lifetime of the apostles, as one by one they're going off and being killed and so forth. So I don't know. So much of Joe's arguments here are really arguments from silence. They're just uninspired. They're and the other problem too, and this has been addressed in the chat here, is
I'll be back in a second.
The fact that what they're responding to is TikToks, just kind of lends itself to I don't know what the term, whatever you want to call it. It's the dumbing down of the argumentation. It's we're responding to little 30-second clips of arguments that are meant to be as shallow as possible, as clickbaity as possible, whatever it is. Even even the TikToks and things you see from other LDS content creators, they're just meant to get attention. And so if that's what we're going to spend our time responding to, then we're starting from a shallow place to begin with.
Yeah.
So that's my biggest issue, I think, with this entire video. And like I said, when I hopped on, right about here is about as far as I have seen so far. So everything moving forward is going to be new for me to react to. But
I'm gonna love your Godmaker's reaction then. But yeah, it is like starting in the shallow end of a pool, getting out of it, going to the kiddie pool, and sitting down.
Yeah, it would be nice to see Joe actually look at some of the sources. Like if he's going to talk about polygamy and he wants to do something on his channel about polygamy and take it more seriously, it would be nice to see him actually respond to Brian Hales and actually go through his works.
And here's the thing, like the primary sources are already on, because I know like when those books came out, Tanya Spackman, who's a cousin of Ben Spackman, helped fair produce the website and got everything that was scanned on that website. So it's there. And by the way, like someone asked a really good question, and I want your guys' answer to this. I wonder when Pints with Aquinas will do his special debunking of Judaism.
Oh no. If he wants to get fired, I guess.
Yeah, the day after he gets fired from Daily Wire.
Yeah, there you go. The day after. Yeah.
But we all know he's implying he's so tolerant of Jesus and Christianity.
Yeah.
That's good.
It is funny to me. It's humorous to me that a large percentage of the folks over at Daily Wire are Catholics. But
yeah, at least the ones that we know of, right? So
yeah. And I did see
I wonder if they would still
Daily
be there
Wire,
if it was pre-Vatican II, you know.
Who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder what Council of Florence said about Jews and other schismatics and heretics, you know, but
well, and with respect to the Daily Wire, the folks at the Daily Wire and how they interact with Latter-day Saints, I did see that Jasmine was quoted in a recent article. I think they shared it yesterday.
Oh, they did use her then. Okay.
I think they did use her.
Celine was trying to get in on that too. Was she used?
I don't remember. I just skimmed the article just to see who was named, and I saw Jasmine. And that was about it that I recognized at least. But I didn't read the full article. I was just kind of skimming it. So they have a weird issue, I think, in the Daily Wire of an anti-LDS bias amongst the folks who produce content for the Daily Wire. And we saw that even several months ago with I can't remember his name, one of the producers over there got in a big Twitter thing that just kind of blew up. And I know folks at Ward Radio and Luke Hansen and stuff were responding to them.
yeah, and shout out again to Luke Hansen. I think he did a good job against Joe on the Adam God topic.
Yeah, he did a bang up job, I think.
By the way, Joe actually taught to become a member of the church, you had to go through the veil. Did any of you guys actually catch that?
I haven't watched it, but that's bad.
I mean, wow. I mean, the levels of stupidity that went into that one comment.
Has he never seen an LDS baptism? Is that...
Here's the thing, like, he should know that we do believe in baptism regeneration, like baptism is the means.
Right.
I mean, I would never expect to hear that from, like, say, a Colonel Broussard or a Trent Horn, or even, like, say, somebody who doesn't really interact with Mormonism, like a Robert Sungenis or a John Salza, you know. But wow.
Well, and this goes back to the prior video they dropped that we responded to a few weeks ago, where he was under the impression that if something is stated from the pulpit in the tabernacle, that meant something.
Oh, Luke called him up. Luke called him up on that. But like to understand like how stupid that is, it's like how fundamentalist Protestants think. Like, see, ex cathedra is to be taken at face value. So, like,
right
when the Pope sits on his papal chair, if he addresses faith or morals, that's an ex cathedra from the chair comment. Ergo, it's infallible. That's how stupid that argument is. Ignoring like say ex cathedra is not an ex cathedra comment doesn't mean like the Pope has to be sitting. It means he has to meet certain criteria, like he's speaking universally using his magisterial authority as representative of Peter, successor Peter. He's addressing faith and morals. He addresses the universal church, and it's irreformable teaching. It doesn't mean like Leo sits on his chair and says like has a theological thought and shares it with the College of Cardinals, and therefore it's as binding as like the bodily assumption of Mary. But that is as low IQ as it is. And I've come across like say some fundamentalists who thinks ex cathedra has that implication. I'm sorry, but like Joe would not tolerate that kind of level of argumentation from like say a critic of Catholicism, and rightly so. It kind of shows they haven't read Vatican I at all, let alone read it carefully, or Gasser's Relatio. But it kind of shows like he didn't even read, like, say, the Journal Discourse sermon in its context as well. It was obvious if you read the context what was going on. Because there's those at times where at the Tabernacle, Brigham actually would correct himself, or like there were like different opinions at the Salt Lake Tabernacle. And I know there's just like loads of silliness going on.
Yeah, like Brigham and Orson would basically have public debates at the Tabernacle.
Yeah,
I mean, that's kind of famous. So anyway,
yeah. So that's
yeah.
kind of bad.
This was supposed to be just for the first century, and when they replace Judas in Acts 1, they're clear that anyone who's going to be one of the 12 has to be someone who accompanied Jesus.
Everyone look at the audience Q&A section where I kind of show like if you take this as the normative rule, you end up with a internal contradiction. And if you're a faithful Catholic who accepts the Council of Trent, you don't believe that the autographs contain contradiction. So
his ministry. And Luke 22 is clear that there are 12 saved people who will sit on the thrones in heaven, judging the 12 tribes.
Which was said before Judas betrayed him, right? So does that mean like Judas is not like son of perdition? Again, if you read like say the scholarship on this, and as well as like the text in Revelation 21 about the 12 cornerstones, they're borrowing from like say the 12 tribes of Israel. It's symbolic language. It's not meant to be say there's only 12 apostles, uppercase A apostles, simpliciter. It doesn't address it one way or another if there's a continuation. You need like say some kind of external source to actually make a definitive decision. And we have our external source, they have their external source, which also claims public revelation ceased. But I would argue like binding and loosing a la Matthew 16 and Matthew 18 for the entire apostles is intimately tied into public revelation. It's not like something that's additional to public revelation. So, but there's ways to argue even as an internal critique against Roman Catholic Ecclesiology on this particular point. But yeah, again, just look at the audience Q&A review I did, which was also fresh off the cuff with myself and QRLM Terry John. Shout out if he's still listening to this. So yeah, we were going to go and where I quote, like say, Sweep, a left-leaning scholar who Trent Horn and others have quoted in context. I'm not saying there's any eisegesis there, but they've quoted him. So like, he does say like, yeah, it is saying this, but like if you absolutize it, there's a internal contradiction in Acts and the New Testament on this issue. So you guys want to chime in with anything anyway?
Good on that one.
12 isn't meant to be a perpetual institution. There are exactly 12 saints plus Judas who occupy that role.
All right, let's look at the next one. Man, there's a whole lot of Jacob. Now let's just pause before we play this. Just thanks, Finn. Is this because Jacob is the primary apologist for Mormonism right now?
He does a lot.
Yeah. Are there others who are?
Jacob is really good at me. To be fair, like I can understand like focusing on Jacob because he does have a very good social media reach, and I like Jacob on a personal level. So, and I'm actually currently helping him with his debate against James White on Reformed theology and other considerations. So I do like him. I do disagree with him on a couple things. For instance, his collective witness model. I don't think I completely agree with it. I mean, there's some truth to it, but like I don't think like it stands on its own. And some of these arguments for some topics, like the Great Apostasy debate, I was critical of some of these perspectives as well. Although I was much more critical of Joe, and not simply because I'm LDS. It's just like I thought Jacob did better in that debate. But yeah, he does have very good social media reach, and I really like the recent 2 parts he did with Blake Oster on monotheism and related topics.
I will say too, one of the things that we keep seeing more and more of as time goes on is this sort of like inception within the YouTube sphere of apologists responding to apologists rather than responding directly to the scholarship that those apologists are referencing to make their arguments. And so this is highlighted here to me as Matt asks Joe, are there other LDS apologists, or is it just Jacob? Whatever. Like, I can understand why you would ask that question.
Well, I can understand like why Matt would be ignorant about this, because like Mormonism is probably like
absolutely
he doesn't really think about. Like he's out like it's weird, but
I have no problem with Matt being unfamiliar with other folks in the LDS sphere who are also promoting and making content. But this highlights that very issue, that what gets seen the most is stuff that is packaged in a way to be more popular. And I think Jacob overall does a very good job with his content. Like you said, there may be things here and there that I disagree with him on, but you can't deny that he is a very charismatic, likable figure in LDS apologetics online. And he is very consistently pushing out more content and responding to things. He's engaging people in debates publicly. So you cannot deny his popularity and his growth over the last few years. There's a reason why he's done so well for himself. And I understand why Matt would be unfamiliar with other folks in the sphere. But the problem that highlights for me is the level of argumentation that Matt and Joe and others will be critiquing are going to be more apologetics, pop level stuff online, TikTok and YouTube, rather than the academic, scholarly, rigorous stuff that are being produced by folks like, take your pick. I mean,
Smooch, Jasmine,
Smooch
Neil, Interpreter Foundation.
So there's a lot of other places that produce more scholarly stuff and are much more rigorous in that. The problem for them, though, is when you go into a lot of detail and depth in any one of these topics, a lot of people are going to be bored out of their tree and not care to stick around to see the full arguments. They are wanting the quick 30-second apologetic argument to push back against a critique. And so you're not getting that level of depth. It would be nice to see the Informed Saints folks and others be able to kind of push out to the forefront a little bit more and become more popular, like Jacob has done for himself. And I see Jacob as kind of the bridge between those worlds. David Snell of Keystone, I think, is also a bridge between those worlds.
David's great. Yeah.
He's awesome. He's one of my favorites online because he so embodies the best of both worlds, where he's very very kind, very thoughtful. He's approachable, but he's also going to bring the receipts, and it's packaged in a way that is friendly for those who are not going to stick around for an hour-long sermon or lecture. And so I would like to see, as time goes on, folks like that become more popular and more well-known in this space. I just don't see it happening. And so what you're going to get is a continual sort of, like I said, inception of apologists responding to apologists, as like in the tone that we see here with Matt and Joe. and it's all
Yeah.
going to be just dumbed down.
By the way, credit to like Trent Horn, who, in spite of like my many differences with him on very issues, like at least like he often sends his scripts on the topic of Mormonism these days to Jacob Hansen for review. So at least there's that. But yeah, I like Jacob. He is like he doesn't have like training, and I don't think he knows Hebrew or Greek, but he knows Spanish. But still, he's very good at what he does, and I think like everyone knows, like I was meant to be debating James White, but I couldn't get the temporary visa for various reasons. But so he's taking my place, albeit it was meant to be on Sola Scriptura. But Jacob will be asking James if he wants to do it online, so we'll see. But yeah, that's a bit off topic. Let's see. Let's continue because we're about 30% through. So
His brother does stuff, and then there's what's his name, Hayden, who I don't remember Hayden's last name. So
Hayden Curl. So who we were talking about when
They
we were
use
doing
Hayden
the
Carroll
review.
later as well. It's like they're clearly just trying to go after who they think are their popular people. So
Well, to be fair, they are popular. Like Hayden's
They are,
new channel
yeah.
has like exploded. So like
yeah.
he sat down with Trent. So there's not a lot of people doing a ton.
Okay, well that explains it. All right, thanks, Finn. This episode is sponsored
Oh, and by the way, shout out to Zach Dumas, who's on the chat. Zach's a great guy.
by Hallow. Hallow is the #1 Catholic prayer and meditation app, which is built to help you find real peace and grow closer to God in the middle of a busy, distracted world. If you're like a lot of people, you're feeling stress and anxiety, glued to your phone and struggling to build a consistent prayer life. Well, the good news is that Hallow is going to turn that same device that distracts you into a simple, beautiful way to enter into prayer at any time. I've been using Hallow for years now, and myself and my wife have found it terribly helpful. Inside the app, you'll get over 10,000 audio guided sessions, daily prayer, the Rosary, the Divine Mercy Chaplet, Lectio Divina, Bible readings, and so on and so forth. And it all really helps you slow down and meditate. You can even choose beautiful music to put behind it, like Gregorian chant or rain.
I have to say this, as a olive branch to my Roman Catholic friends, I love Gregorian chant and I love Latin chant. So, often like I listen to Latin music on my walk, and I often backwards translate into Romanian or Italian just to make sure I actually keep up with those languages. But I love Latin, so.
Sounds, and you can choose a
So I don't hate everything you guys do.
meditation for as long as you have. Maybe at the end of the night, you're like, okay, I got 10 minutes. I'm going to set this for 10 minutes, and it really fits into your schedule. It's really beautiful. Hallow also has sleep stories, peaceful music, pray lists. It goes on and on. Plus, you can also set gentle prayer reminders, track your prayer streaks, and journal after every session. So go to hallow.com/MattFrad right now, and you'll get it free for 3 months. That's hallow.com/MattFrad to get 3 months free. Starting something new can be kind of scary. I remember when I launched this show, Pints with Aquinas, I really had no clue what I was doing. I kept thinking, what if only my mum listens, and what if I make a fool of myself, which, I've definitely done from time to time. Starting something new like a podcast or business online can sound a bit overwhelming. Like you need product description, a month trial today.
Therefore,
we
God
pause it
never
as this
has
conclusion?
involves a change in emoji for a moment and see what happens. Did Jesus actually?
Okay, we're discussing Christology. So,
Yay.
Yay.
have any of you guys seen this section? And if so, how bad is it?
No,
I
this
actually
is all
forgot
new to me.
this. I forgot this section because I thought next was God Makers. So
Okay.
I just watched it 2 days ago, so I'm sorry, but I'm kind of forgetting this section. Probably got
No, they're
Okay.
doing this section, and then the next one is with Chandler, and then after that is Godmakers.
That's right, they did
Okay,
a Chandler one. Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
I
so
was totally distracted.
at the very least, let's go up until Chandler. I mean, like maybe once Godmakers, I'll want to tear my hair out, but we'll see. But by the way, Chandler will be on the live stream tomorrow, all things working out, and we'll be finishing the debate review on soteriology. So that'll be fun.
Suffer? How could God suffer?
Okay, nerd time. In Catholic theology, of course, you have absolute divine simplicity, but you also have the view of the hypostatic union, where Jesus is a singular referent. You see this in Ephesus with its condemnation of Nestorianism, and of course the Council of Chalcedon in 451. Ephesus was 431, where Jesus is a single person. So he's a singular referent, and Ephesus was correct. Mary is Theotokos in that respect, and he's the mother of God. So we have there shouldn't be any issues there in this Christian Nestorian. In that one person, however, Jesus was not a human in mainstream Trinitarian thought. He was a divine person who assumed humanity because there's a species differentiation and other considerations. So he's a single person with two distinct natures and two wills. The divine will he had for all eternity, and of course the divine nature, the human nature, and out of the nature comes the will. If you're familiar with the monotelitism debate and other considerations. So when it says like Jesus suffered, the response would be he suffered in his humanity. Or when Jesus did not know when the second coming, he's speaking with respect to his humanity in terms of his divine knowledge. He knew as the person. The problem though is like that kind of results in divine deception, because if you ask, did the person of Jesus know when the second coming would be? Would they say, with respect to his human knowledge, he may not have had that knowledge, but in terms of his divine knowledge, he knew it. The problem though is like that's like saying, if Jacob asked me like if I have spare change for the bus, and I say no, I don't, and it turns out I did, it's like, well, I'm only speaking from my left pocket, not my right pocket.
Yeah.
And the same when it comes to see suffering, it's like, yeah, he suffered in his humanity, but did the person suffer? And that's where like functionally you do have to split Jesus, and that's Nestorian. And it's not a problem necessarily for like the Catholics because they don't believe in penal substitution, but especially for Calvinists if you believe in penal substitution, because if God poured his wrath out on Jesus, who or what suffered in the atonement? Now, if you say the person of Jesus suffered, that means that there's a divide in the Trinity. But if you say only the humanity of Jesus suffered, that's Nestorian because you're splitting Jesus into two reference or two someones.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, and again, like, of course, Catholics do not believe in penal substitution because they don't believe in double imputation as understood by historic Protestants. There is the idea of imputation, but it's not the Protestant understanding of imputation. For more, see the 6th session of the Council of Trent that discusses justification. But we'll see. I mean, I think I know how Jacob will argue, so I'll see like if I actually will agree with him on this, but we'll see.
Let's assume perfect
By the way, I say like other Jacob, not Jacob writer here.
being theology for a moment and see what happens. Premise 1, perfect beings don't change. Premise
Yeah, that's part and parcel of Thomism. God in his essence doesn't change. In fact, like he doesn't actually have any emotion. So like when scripture says God relented or God loves, that's only analogical language. God cannot be moved. He does not actually have emotion, and he's completely outside of time. So it's like, yeah, that's clearly what it says,
2, suffering involves a change in emotional state.
Yep, that's true. You go from like a moment of not suffering to suffering, so.
Premise 3, God is a perfect being. Therefore,
they're going to appeal, let's say, hypostatic union here.
Mm-hmm.
God
Pause it
never
as
has.
this conclusion finishes, Finn. All right, let's just talk about this before we go on to the rest of it. I mean, because the first thing I thought that if perfect beings don't change and growth involves change, then Jesus Christ should never have grown. Is he actually trying to make?
Yeah, but like Matt, in your theology, it was the humanity that developed and grew, not the, because Christ in his Christ as a person was perfect in terms of his divine nature and divine will and divine knowledge. It's just in terms of his humanity grew a lot. Luke 2:52.
The argument that Christ didn't suffer on the cross?
No, he's trying to make the argument that this disproves the impassibility of God.
Okay.
So he's going to say yes.
And I would argue none of the biblical authors believe in the impassibility of God. And even if you want to appeal, like, say, certain texts that say, like, God does not change and God does not relent, it's humans who say it. But before and after, like in those Samuel texts, prophets and God actually says the opposite and says he has been moved, he has been relented. And even the atonement requires changing God. Because even if you believe it's propitiatory, that it appeases God, there's a moment before and moment after before God, the Father, is appeased by the sacrifice of Christ. There's loads of considerations here. So,
I mean, I'll just say this. Part of the restoration that I love is the fact that we have the Enochic stuff in the Book of Moses, and that we see that God truly has emotion, that he cries over his children doing these evil things. That is a more powerful God to me than this impassible God that feels nothing. Where his qualities like love are just some kind of logical something and not really something that he emotes toward us. Like, come on. This is actually one of the things about the theology of the Trinity that really, really gets to me. It splits God. You were kind of talking about Nestorianism and stuff. Like, that's how I've always thought about it, is like they're splitting God. And so I could see how the idea of Nestorianism came about. but it just doesn't make sense to me in Scripture. Not just because we have the Restoration scriptures. It doesn't make sense out of the Bible, but I don't know. Whatever. Sorry. Go on.
No, it's fine. By the way, for a good LDS critique of Perfect Being Theology, Volume 1 of Blake Oster's Exploring Mormon Thought series, and also a review of the Catholic book that came out, edited by Frank Beck, which Blake gave an overview of some of the problems of Aquinas's 5 ways. So
Jesus suffered, and this proves that God can suffer. He has emotions and everything else. So divine simplicity must be false.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah, divine. And by the way, it's not simply divine simplicity; it's absolute divine simplicity. Now, to be fair, I'm not saying Joe was being deceptive. It's just like once you know what ADS entails, that's even more problematic. At least, like the Eastern Orthodox have their energy essence distinction. Base Palamas.
The reason I asked that question is...
Oh, by the way, speaking of Palamas, he referred to the filioque, the hypostatic filioque, as satanic and Arian. But, it's okay for Eastern Rite Catholics to venerate him as a saint.
I remember when I was about 16, 17 years old, an LDS co-worker of mine gave me a DVD on the life of Jesus, because I had just come to Christ, and so I watched it, and I remember being shocked that Jesus didn't look like he was in pain at all. And I asked him, and he said, well, the Bible never says he was in pain. But to be clear, that's not an LDS.
Yeah, that's also not true. The suffering servant suffered.
Right, okay. All
right. Maybe it's artistic dispersion, but like I've never actually... I know like we're not exactly fans of like, say, using like, say, a corpus on a cross and stuff like that, but I think we can all agree, like, as all faithful LDS and informed LDS, Christ did suffer, right?
we just put statues.
It's not just that.
Yeah, go on.
It's not just that. Occasionally, like, I'll catch flack from the Christians for having the belief that Jesus bled for every poor in the garden. It's like in LDS theology, it's like, not only do we think Christ suffered, we especially think he suffered like more than a lot of Trinitarians do.
Yeah, and there's also like
that's where I was going to go. We have the statues that we just put in front of or around or wherever on Salt Lake Temple grounds area. One is him suffering in Gethsemane, and one is him on the Via Dolorosa, walking toward the hill, right? And so we understand he suffered. We're making it really well known now with these statues. Apparently we had to. I didn't even understand that was something that was commonly believed. The Gethsemane one, I hear a lot, but I didn't know that they thought we didn't think he suffered at all anywhere, blah, blah, blah. That's weird.
To be fair, like, maybe it was the DVD. Maybe they just didn't want to depict his suffering Jesus for like reverential reasons. By the way, this is not me dumping on Joe or Matt, so, but I'm just
we
saying,
don't
like,
know their point of reference, but it is weird.
Yeah, but I'll be happy to like take Matt at face value. But like for those who are, even if you think like it's about the crucifixion, which funny enough John Taylor did, section 19 actually has this, and this is Jesus speaking about the atonement, verse 16 to 18 to 19. Let's just kind of go through here. For behold, I, God, that is Christ, have suffered these things for all that they might not suffer if they would repent. But if they would not repent, they must suffer even as I, which suffering caused myself, even God, the greatest of all, to tremble before because of pain. Sorry, my eyesight's pretty bad these days. And to bleed at every pore, and to suffer both body and spirit. So he suffered both corporally and spiritually. And would that I might not drink the bitter cup and shrink. Nevertheless, glory be to the Father, and I partake and finish my preparation unto the children of men. So, yeah, again, this is not me dumping on them, and I'm sure, like, say, I'll take Matt at face value, probably eat like some really silly artwork or DVD work by the church showing like Jesus in the garden but not suffering, but we do believe he did suffer. That was part and parcel of the atonement,
Well, and that's Alma 7 as well. I mean, he suffered the pains and iniquities and
Alma 7:11.
Yeah. So it's in multiple places. It's not like it's hidden somewhere in a footnote.
Yeah.
But again, this is not me critiquing them, just like more like clarifying, so.
Sure.
Let's continue.
But what if only the human consciousness in Jesus suffered? Does this mean Jesus has two consciousnesses?
Yeah, a human and divine. In fact, William Most, who was like a pretty base conservative Catholic priest and scholar, actually wrote an entire book on the consciousness of Christ. And this is one of the things I think he discussed. So,
Two minds? But if Jesus was a single person, how could he have two minds? Think about it.
All right, have you thought about it?
I have.
All right.
So one of the
But has he taught about it correctly? That's the thing.
difficulties, and I've talked about this with Jacob before, is what we mean by mind might differ. So it's better to use terms like intellect and will to be just a little more precise, to be a little clearer. And it is obviously possible.
Did Christ, in his human or divine intellect, actually know when the second coming would be? And how do you not split Jesus functioning into... It's like this. Did the person of Jesus know when the second coming would be? Did the person of Jesus suffer? Did the person... and once you ask these questions, I'm not saying like it necessitates a Nestorian answer to be consistent, but like a lot of Trinitarians fall into Nestorianism once you ask about the person of Jesus.
Well, it goes beyond that part, because it's like regarding the knowledge, if the two minds or the two intellects or the two wills, if they're hypostatically unionized, like how does one know something the other doesn't? Like where's the kind of the breakdown, the divide there? I'm not even asking as a gotcha. I legitimately, I don't know what a Roman Catholic would say because I'm not an expert.
I've heard some, and I'm not sure like how far they would go. Like say there would be like normal limitations on Jesus's intellectual capacity as a human, or in terms of his human will. But at least they all agree like Christ had a human will and human intellect, because I think William Lane Craig actually denies that, which is why like so many Trinitarians think like the guy's a heretic, which he is for other reasons.
But I just don't see any reason how that could even be the case, especially if they think that the Bible was written inerrantly. Like clearly God can impose like divine, inerrancy like through his authors in the text. Why can't he do the same for Jesus regarding the knowledge of the second coming?
Yeah, because like in Catholic dogmatic theology, Jesus all throughout the incarnation beheld a beatific vision. He always had that special gaze upon God and his being, if you will, a la the saints in heaven, all throughout his humanity, even as like an embryo. So there's like various interesting things that kind of call into question. I'm not sure like how common that is amongst like say creedal Protestants, but is Catholic dogma, and Ott and others have like discussions about Christ always beholding the beatific vision.
Two intellects.
And of course that has implications as well for like say Christ's human knowledge and Christ, he's the person, and other issues.
This is not a great analogy, but imagine it this way. There are different ways you know things. You might know the burner is hot. You put your hand on it. You know it in a different kind of experiential way than you knew it before. So you can know things in multiple ways. There's multiple ways of knowing. So there's no logical reason why a single being couldn't have two natures, why a single being couldn't have two intellects. Now, admittedly, this is...
Can a single person know and not know the same thing at the same time? Can a single person be all-knowing and limited in knowledge at the same time? Keep in mind, I'm being very precise here. Person.
Different than our own experience. But that's not a particularly helpful argument. It's not a particularly strong argument to say, well, that's not how humans work. Well, sure, it's not how humans work. That's not the normal nature of a human being to also be a divine person. Of course, this is part of why Jesus is distinct and unique. But like this, being is what you are, and person is who you are, or nature is what you are, and a person is who you are. So a rock, if you say, what is that? It's a rock. If you say, who is that? That's a nonsensical question. There's one what and zero who's in a rock. But if I say, what is that? Well, it's a human. Who is that? Well, it's Matt. There's one and one. So there's no reason that there has to be one and one, because there's one and zero with a rock, one and one with a human, one and three with God. Logically, there's no difficulty with that. Experientially, that's not how we live. We can't imagine that any more than we could imagine what it's like to be an animal or a rock. But that...
By the way, imagine like if an LDS actually gave this kind of response to him, he would say like, oh, that's just like an absolute cop-out. These are like how LDS have to get around, like say the basic obvious facts of things, I mean, being honest, actually, like, he would.
I was actually having a thought like LDS could try to grab that argument in a way, because if we're going to have a Godhead, right? Well, Jesus can be God. He's not God the Father, but yeah, the type of being he is God, and he is Jesus Christ. He's not, El Shaddai or whatever we want to call Heavenly Father to distinguish him, but like, I don't see how we're getting the Trinity from this myself. I might just not be thinking about exactly how he's trying to frame it, but I didn't hear the Trinity there. I heard something that approximates it to in some degree, but the mystery is still there and it's ununderstandable. That's what I heard.
Yeah, apparently like Jesus grew in his impersonal human flesh, and he knew things in his impersonal human flesh, and so on and so forth, because he's the divine person who assumed humanity, a la Athanasian Christology.
Doesn't mean it's logically impossible.
Personally, I don't know how they square this with absolute divine simplicity. This is, and I'm not saying that as like a gotcha or anything. I'm just genuinely curious when you have the two natures, the two consciousnesses, or whatever you want to call it, and then you have the human nature grows and develops, and the person of Jesus can both know things and not know things simultaneously. How does that square, or how would they square this with absolute divine simplicity? That's what I don't understand.
Well, the absolutely divine, simple second person of the Trinity, don't ask you like how the differences in relations between the Father and Son. That's a different issue. Assumed impersonal human nature and all of that. I mean, there's like very lengthy discussions about, like, say, this by Sheben and other systematic theologians. Pole, P-O-H-L-E, and others have discussed this as well. But it's really problematic. It's like trying to read like way too much later innovations into it. And I'm not talking about, like, say, later terminology. I'm just like later ideas that were alien to the top world of Second Temple Judaism. But let's continue to see if Joe actually does this, because this is like the typical response you would hear from, like, say, any Thomist.
Some kind of argument against
Okay.
either the Trinity or the dual natures of Christ.
Destroyed. No, that's a pretty lousy response.
All right, let's take a look at this next one.
No, I'm on.
Chandler.
Real quick, I don't know why he was in the hospital, and it's on Chandler for deciding to make a video anyway, but just so you guys know, like, he was super like drugged up from recovering. So he's really nasally. This is not how he normally sounds.
Yeah.
To be fair, my health problems, I understand 1% completely.
Who is this?
I'm out of surgery. I guess the Trinity is so clear because I'm tripping. It makes so much more sense now.
Well, maybe I should have saved that.
Chandler has actually done better work. Like, the very fact you're focusing on this and not, like, say, some of his better stuff. And it's like this. I've been pretty critical of some of Chandler's stuff. I think he's improving. Especially as he interacts with Travis Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
But do this, which he's obviously, like, say, crap taking, or crap posting, I should say. Pick one of his other videos. I mean, he has discussed the Trinity on various lives he's done as well.
Yeah.
And still be critical of it. I would probably share in some of the criticisms, especially of his earlier work.
Yeah, noble God, I can understand. Not. I still debunk them. Any day of the week. Restore truth. Ow.
There's so much going on here. Is he making fun of the Trinity? Or is he
Yes.
making fun of like 2,000 years of Christians believing it?
It's not 2,000 years of Christians, Matt. I mean, the earliest Christians not believe in creatio ex nihilo. That's the general scholarly consensus. And for the Trinity to be true, you need creatio ex nihilo, especially for ADS to be true. So, and please don't pull the whole Tertullian and Amphibius of Amphibius of Antioch, or the earliest guy who used the term Trinitas and Triad for God. It's like they were using it in the sense of, like, say, a triad, not the Trinity. So no word concept fallacy, please. And you have Justin Martyr, who says Jesus is Hod Deutros Theos, the second God, second in rank to the Father, and so other considerations as well. And do not believe in creation out of nothing. So yeah, it's early, much earlier than, say, the Assumption of Mary or Vatican I understanding the papacy, but it's not 2,000 years. And again, not a great video from Chandler. Cringe. As a kid saying, I consider him a
But
friend.
this goes back to my earlier point of we've now entered an arena in which people are responding to and reacting to these really short clips that are lacking in substance, even from this clip from Chandler. And I think Chandler would agree this is not his best clip. This is just something funny he put out while he had some time laying in the hospital. He has a lot of other content that he's put out that they could have chosen to respond to, and they didn't. They specifically picked this.
Yeah. Yeah. Cringe.
In the doctrine of the Trinity?
I mean, obviously, he's wiser than all of them.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. I mean, there is an obvious useful hubris to it.
Right.
But let's just say this. The fact that there is something unknowable and hard to grasp about the Trinity is certainly true, and is something that points to the truth of it.
Here's the thing. Would he accept, to be fair, would he accept that from any other religious tradition? No.
He doesn't seem to accept it from ours at a minimum.
Well, that's kind of the question, Robert. It's like, okay, the Trinity is hard to grasp. God's incomprehensible because we're just stupid, finite creatures. Well, it's like, well, why is God creating creatures out of nothing that are so deficient that they can't even understand him? a lot of this would be cleared up if God just made us a lot smarter than we were.
Yeah, and it's essentially like say like a case like it's a difficult doctrine. Like there are difficult doctrines out there, but it's like Walter Martin saying like, well, no, the Trinity is not illogical, it's a-logical. Okay, sure.
That proves
Now-
it's true.
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, would he accept that kind of apologetic from a Muslim or a Christadelphian or a Hindu or what have you? It's like, no, he wouldn't. You know, but apparently he gives him pass, you know, because, you know, Rome says so.
A few reasons. Number one, there is this basic paradox that we can't even know our own mind. So, you know, you have this, you've mentioned before, you've been married to your wife for years and she still surprises you, you don't know everything about her. That we have this experience with other people. We have this experience with ourselves. We do things where we say, why did I do that? And neurologically, the great paradox is this. Our brains are too complicated for us.
Yeah, Joe the neurologist, I forgot, like, you know.
To understand. And if they were simple enough for us to understand, they would be too stupid to even understand something as simple as themselves. So if we can't know ourselves at the level,
something is difficult to understand, like neurology or how our brain works, ergo, we can believe in something as complex and anachronistic in terms of, say, the Second Temple Jewish worldview of the New Testament as Nicene Constantinopolitan Trinitarianism. And honestly, if anyone thinks that's a good argument, I have a bridge in Brooklyn I'll sell to you. And by the way, you can still be a Trinitarian and still say this is not a good argument. So this is not like a defeater against Trinitarianism. But would you accept that for any other belief from any other tradition? Like if a SDA were to use that for, like, say, their understanding, say, Daniel and investigative judgment, would you accept that as an apologetic? No.
of brain, at the level of mind, at the level of our soul, we do things we don't know why we do them. Then the idea that we're just going to comprehend the infinite God is as arrogant as just mocking 2,000 years of Christianity because from your hospital bed you think you've got it all figured.
This is life eternal, to know ye, the only true God, and Jesus Christ ye have sent.
Yeah, it's like, why? Why is it arrogant? Why can't God create an environment for his creatures to understand him fully? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, here's the thing. I can concede, like, say, God can be the most complex being or person there is. And yet, like, how many God is and other considerations cannot be beyond us. Because keep in mind, if you knowingly reject the Trinity, that is a mortal sin. And of course, like, you know, it turns out like you have a mental defect or there's some other reason for, like, say, invincible ignorance, which would be very difficult for any of us because we're informed about these issues. That's a mortal sin. And that means you will go to hell if you die of mortal sin that's unrepented in historic Catholic theology, which I'm sure Joe and Matt would agree with, because it's basically Tridentine theology. You know, so you don't have to be a Trinitarian full-fledged, but if you knowingly reject this, you go to hell. So we're not exactly talking about, like, say, the fine points or the minutiae of, like, say, eschatology here, you know. We're talking about, like, eternal life and eternal death.
Like, that's the basic story. Like, yes, there is something otherworldly about the nature of God, which of course there is. And even a pagan would have had the humility to realize, well, obviously God isn't just like a slightly bigger and stronger version of myself. That's certainly the biblical.
Oh, keep in mind, I think I mentioned this in the audience Q&A. Natural revelation is dogmatic in Catholic theology. See De Filius from the Vatican I Council. So apparently, like, say, the trees are obvious, but Scripture is not obvious when it comes to, say, core doctrines. You know, when it comes to, say, like, how clear, unclear certain things are for a Roman Catholic.
Depiction of God. That his ways are not like our ways. And they're above them. And so it's not shocking to find, oh yeah, the triune God is not simple enough in that sense. Like, it's not easy enough for me to just wrap my mind around the infinite God.
Destroyed.
Obviously, when you look into church history, one of the ways you can tell whether or not there was serious disagreement is whether or not people were talking about it. You know, and so.
Yeah, because I remember, like, say, the Assumption of Mary being talked about in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd century, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
I think this is the God Maker section now, so this should be good.
Oh, is it? Okay. This is where Jacob gets to shine. Our Jacob here with us.
Oh, I don't know about shining. This is probably where I crash out.
Yeah, well, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
I was just being nice about it.
On the source, they actually dump and say this is crap. Zero respect for either one of them going from now on, because this is basically someone saying, like, Jack Schick is great. when it comes to say Catholicism. It's that bad. Or Hislop is good when it comes to ecclesiastical and Catholic history. It's like, no.
You don't see any major disagreement, right, on the Eucharist, for example, until what?
Oh, you mean like when Irenaeus actually teaches, like, say, consubstantiation, you don't have the idea, like, say, the Eucharist being a propitiatory sacrifice, or you don't even have, like, Eucharistic adoration worship until, like, say, near the end of the first, beginning of the second millennium. And according to Trent, if you don't do such, you're under anathema. Again, this is really simplistic understanding, say, the development of Eucharistic theology and other considerations, let alone, like, say, what transubstantiation is. And it's not a physical presence of Christ, it's a virtual presence of Christ. And all those later scholastic Aristotelian concepts you need first to actually have the nuanced understanding that goes into the dogma. So, yeah.
Was it the 11th century?
9th century.
Baron
Yeah,
Garius
yeah.
to us? It's 11th century, I think.
Well, before that, there were, I'm trying to remember who it was.
Okay.
Either way, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. But
No, there were other Eucharistic controversies before Baron Garius of Tours. You know, that of course, like, that's the main one that, like, eventually would lead, say, Fort Lateran dogmatizing transubstantiation at 1215. But no, there were other controversies as well. And yeah.
then you start to see some talk about it, and we could look to other things. My question for you is, was there any early debate about the Trinity? Because clearly the Christians are talking about Christ being divine, the Holy Spirit, the Father.
Yeah, there are debates about whether Christ...
Justin Martyr, the very fact, like, and it's generally agreed by, like, patristic scholars, they did hold, like, a form of subordinationist Christology. Errol Amy and others have actually done very good work at cataloging scholarship on this point as well. So, and even David Waltz, who's not LDS, has done a good job on this as well. So, and of course, like, Justin not believing creation out of nothing, that's an integral building block of Nicene Constantinopian Trinity and other considerations as well. You guys want to chime in on how, like, stupid and low IQ this argument is? And again, like, one can be a Trinitarian and still admit, yeah, you know, they weren't precise. Sometimes they were inconsistent with the substance of the teachings on some points as well.
It's a lot of equivocation. It's if you see somewhere in Scripture where it talks about the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit each being divine, ergo Trinity. It's the same really shallow argumentation that we see, and like we've talked about this many times in other response videos and stuff that we've done, but it's the same thing that a lot of people do when they equivocate concepts or even terms. Word equals Bible or what have you. Like, there's a number of places where people do this. This is the same thing. It's
or like how Joe and others defend, like, certain aspects of Mariology. Is like, well, they said nice things about Mary and they said nice things about Peter, so Immaculate Conception and Petrine supremacy.
Yeah,
it's a lot of word concept fallacies and the like. So
is divine in the same way the Father is divine, but nobody is arguing for, like, the Mormon view of the Godhead.
Justin Martyr saying that Jesus is second in rank to the Father and this Holy Spirit's third in rank to the Father, and other considerations as well. You also have Tertullian, even in these pre-Montanist writings, not believing, like, Spirit was immaterial, so he did not believe in some type of divine, let alone absolute divine simplicity. And again, subordinationist Christology, which was really common even in the Nicene era as well. So
yeah. And Blake
of course,
just
like,
did his video with Jacob as well, kind of giving a summary of this.
Mm-hmm.
There might be some that are closer to the Mormon view, but it's worth, like, if you're going to be a Mormon and you're going to say, the Trinitarian Christians got it wrong, you should be able to say, well, here's this other group of Christians who had it right. Or you have to say, this nature of God was apparently simultaneously so easy, everyone can just understand it, but also somehow nobody did understand it. And I think that should give you serious pause of who were the people who believed what Mormons believe about God.
Okay, let's just say for the sake of argument that's true. Joe, apply that to Mariology. The assumption of Mary is really easy. Was she taken up to heaven at the end of her life or not? There's no complexity about that. Or what about her Immaculate Conception and personal sinlessness? No. What about the Vatican I and immediate jurisdiction of the singular Bishop of Rome? Nothing. So again, if Joe is to be consistent, it would end up backfiring on him. And we're not talking about, like, say, minutia or, like, say, theological debates in Roman Catholicism. We're talking about de fide dogmas. It's that reprehensible here. Oh, and like Kyle actually says, the Catholics are in trouble when they start acting like Protestants when it comes to Mormonism. Breaking out the Godmakers cartoon is embarrassing for Matt and Joe. Yeah. Trent Horn actually has a book like When Protestants Argue Like Atheists. I really should write a book someday like When Romanists Argue Like Protestants or When Romanists Argue Like Atheists.
I've been saying it for a long time. When Catholics argue against LDS, they argue like Protestants. Just like when Protestants argue against LDS, they argue like atheists.
Yeah, and as much as I disagree with James White, he is 100% correct. Often in these debates against Muslims, inconsistency is a sign of a failed argument.
In the early days of the church, even if they were the losing party at Nicaea, where are they? Because it isn't Arianism, it's not Gnosticism, it's not any of the early heresies. They believe wrong things about God, but they're not wrong in the same way Mormonism is wrong.
Gotcha. All right, let's take a look at the next one. All right, now before we play this one, I've seen this before. This, I think, is not a Mormon cartoon.
It is an anti-Mormon cartoon from the 1980s. I believe it's called The God Makers.
Okay. Well, let's watch it and we'll talk about it after.
Thus, Luke interpreted as Adam and Eve and Jesus.
Mormon doctrines.
It depends on some of the...
None of that is true.
Yeah, I'm skipping the video because I don't want to be triggered too much.
It's fine.
One thing to note:
in one sense, none of that is true.
Cartoon's so bad.
Please tell me.
Gerald and Tanner have panned it. Like that's the level we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, so much so they even wrote a book, actually a couple booklets and books against Decker and Schnoebelen, who claimed to be like an ex-priest, ex-Masonic operative, ex-witch, ex...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the guy is like more of a conscious fraud and liar than anyone I know in reported history. But yeah, even the Tanners, I'm not sure about the cartoon, but I know that they panned, say, the God Makers 2 and practically everything after that by Decker. And the God Makers has been responded to in terms of the book and the video by LDS, like the Lake Gilbert Shafts and others, and even being panned by say that group, the NCAPP or whatever, the Jewish Christian organization. But that's, I'm honestly hoping say Joe will say, well, no, this is on the same level as say Hislop or Jack Schick when it comes to Catholicism. There might be certain truths in it, but I would never present it in this way. And sorry, is this also one that kind of follows me because for some reason I speak a lot with my hands, as with many passionate Irish people, and it just follows me. But yeah, I mean, putting myself as a Catholic, I said, well, there might be some certain truths in it, but I would never use it, and I would nuance things differently. And there's better ways to argue the valid points it raises than this. This is boundary maintenance. It's trying to put fear into people, and it's unbecoming of any informed person to actually use this. And I'm guessing he doesn't do this though, right? Okay, Michael's giving me the hell no look. So,
please tell me none of that is true.
Well, I mean, in one sense, none of that is true.
Please.
If he stops here, I'll actually have some respect for him.
But tell me, those were never Mormon doctrines.
It depends on some of those, what you mean by doctrines. So in terms of black skin being a curse from God, that is in the Book of Mormon, and this is until 1978, a reason why anyone with even a drop of black...
Actually, the Book of Mormon was not used to actually... Yeah, already.
My face.
Okay, already so many problems. The Book of Mormon was actually never used to actually introduce the priesthood restriction, even if you think it came from Joseph Smith. And of course, there's the debate because, in the Book of Mormon, yeah, the Lamanites are cursed with a skin of blackness, but in certain texts in the Book of Mormon, like in Aleph 51, Nephites and Lamanites externally look the same. Nephites actually fool Lamanites into thinking they're one and the same. And if it was literal black skin, it's trying to find say one or two Rice Krispies in a bowl of Cocoa Pops. It would be that easy to actually differentiate them. And the very fact amongst the Nephites they have to try and find a Lamanite is well, it's big if Charles Lecor was at a fair conference. It's yeah, it's him. So there's internal hints that it may not necessarily be literal skin color. Ethan Sprout and others have written about this, and it's Asian Near Eastern, Mesoamerican background. It's probably a form of tattooing and stuff like that. But even if you think say Scows, and I think even Tretness was open to this view, it's literal skin. Racism is condemned in the Book of Mormon, and also it's not talking about African Americans. It's talking about people in Central America, the Lamanites. So there's that was never used as a justification.
Well, that was the point that I was going to.
If you're going to look for scriptural justification, it would be the Book of Abraham more than say the Book of Mormon was used as justification, even as far as the 50s and 60s by David O. McKay. So even worst case scenario, Joe is not actually getting this right. I could present a better argument and I'm sure other Ephesians could present a better argument
Right.
than
Well,
one Decker and two Joe here.
And even just within the context of the Book of Mormon itself, if that's your frame of reference, nowhere in the Book of Mormon do the Nephites poorly treat the Lamanites on the basis of skin color, race, anything of that nature.
In fact, prophets condemn Nephites mistreating Lamanites because they're
right,
brethren.
exactly.
Yeah. Whenever they felt they were supreme, it's there are points in the Old Testament, which is funny because under the comments of this video, there's like multiple people arguing against me that it doesn't exist. There are points in the Old Testament. It's obvious. You can find them simply that say that use language of black skin as a curse. This is something I've gone through with Alan Hansen and others. I mean, I'm not making anything up. This is something that's part and parcel of Semitic languages and the A&E culture of the time. Black
It's in the
was
Book of Job.
cursed, white
That's the most
was
obvious
blessed.
example.
That's correct. It's in the Book of Job. It's all over the place. There's I forget which king, but there's a king who like his hand is cursed and it becomes black and it's described as leprous and stuff. Even though leprosy makes your hand white, a leper's hand is described as black because it's a curse.
Yeah.
So,
and also, like, by the way, like, if you're looking for an article by a black guy defending the Book of Mormon, my friend Adam Stokes, he's not LDS, he's Elijah Message. He actually has written an article on 2 Nephi 5 that was published in the Journal of Book of Mormon Studies, where it looks like Aramaic sources for something very similar as well. He wrote that while he was a conservative or LDS. So, to his credit, like, Adam and I have actually had a couple of Christological debates, and they were really informative. So, unlike certain people, he actually has balls to debate me on meaningful debates where it wouldn't be a gish gallop. So,
was not allowed into the priesthood. And it's only when they start to spread the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Brazil, where it's very hard to find someone who had no admixture of at least a little bit of black blood, that they suddenly receive a new revelation that says, actually, that doesn't.
Actually, the controversy about that was lasting for a number of years. No, that was one of the impetuses for, like, say, it being discussed and debated. But, I mean, and also, like, the Nigerian mission, where, like, say, they tried setting up their own independent church, waiting for the LDS church to, like, recognize them. Really fascinating history. But no, that's really naive. In fact, in 1978, when the revelation was received, and the Tanners even mentioned this on the updated material on the priesthood restriction in Mormonism Shadow Reality, there was like a survey in Utah, and about 80% of respondents said the revelation came out of nowhere. They weren't expecting it, and that was like the general consensus. No one was expecting it in 1978. So much so, like, if external pressure were to cause it, would be in the 50s and 60s with, like, say, the boycotts against BYU by black students and black bodies and other considerations as well. So, and again, this is really naive. Spencer W. Kimball's son, Edward Spencer, has done a lot of work on what led, the various things that led to his father seeking revelation. Even if you think, like, say, it was just like a convenient revelation or like what have you, the idea, like, again, this is really simplistic. And shout out to Jeff Bradshaw, who actually did a lot of work for the Mormon Hour Project on the history of the priesthood restriction. He found loads of really cool sources. So if you go on Mormon Hour and on the articles dealing with the 1970 up until 1978, there's a lot of sources on that. So
beyond that, all the brethren had been discussing lifting the ban since like the late 1950s. I mean, you have apostles like Hugh B. Brown who were pushing for it. Like, there's just no.
You also had Marky Peterson, Bruce McConkie were completely opposed to that.
Yeah.
But, like, if external pressure were to cause it, I would say, like, it would be in the 50s and 60s, because even though it's the Tanners acknowledge, a lot of people actually did not see that coming. In 1978.
Anymore. And so you can read that as official declaration too. But you would have to, like, to be a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, you seemingly have to believe that this, like, God had the same views on race that Americans in the 19th century had on race.
Now apply that to the biblical authors, Joe. So, and also, like, if you think about it, like, this means that God has to change the mind and perspective of all the leaders of the church, and they can't be products of their environment. Can I use the "or" term here? Or will it just offend like all the Americans here?
No, it doesn't offend me.
Use it.
I'm sorry. This is retarded.
Yeah.
Because again, apply to the biblical authors and apply like say like at your own popes, and I know they don't receive revelation, but like the Pope is the proximate rule of faith in Roman Catholic theology at the same time. So yeah, we also acknowledge like prophets and apostles are products of their own time. Just because they may have received revelation doesn't mean like they're not going to have their own biases and prejudices. You're not going to see me defend like say past racism from Brigham Young. I acknowledge it. I try to situate in its historical context. But at the same time, like
I mean,
that's not actually.
It's not even.
That's not a defeater for a purpose, unless you actually think God just zaps people. And no one believes that. Not even Roman Catholics, but and the session, in their understanding like divine revelation and public revelation is seen in the fourth session of Trent.
Regarding like the Bible, it's not even just an Old Testament issue either. In Galatians 2, you have Peter being rebuked by Paul for refusing to incorporate the Gentiles into like the communion with the Jewish followers of Jesus.
Yeah, and I don't think that's a defeater against papal infallibility, but it does show like Peter still retained prejudices and fear of seemingly publicly including like Gentiles in meal fellowship and stuff like that. So, and if you believe like Peter is like say the chief apostle and so forth, like what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And Paul also like had, even by Roman Catholic standards, had pretty misogynistic understandings of women. And the biblical authors were products of their time. I mean, even Joe acknowledged, like when it was discussing plural marriage, God sometimes tolerates like, problematic practices. So why not God tolerates it, in the 19th century as well? No, he was excusing it, but again, like double standards galore and like inconsistency. Again, if he wants to argue, like there are ways to argue this, but not in this way. But of course, this would require, like, say, consistency, reading sources, and being intellectually honest, which, there are, like, intellectually honest Catholics out there, but Joe is not one of them. So, you gents have anything else you want to say?
No, I'm good on that.
Because these sound much closer to the 19th century Americans. We're talking about the curse of Ham and the curse of Cain as the reason there were different races. And all of this has aged terribly.
Yeah, and actually many scholars believe that's where it comes from. Like Mormons adopted and Mormonized it. Trentners and others have discussed that.
Now completely discredited among all but the most fringe people alive today.
Destroyed.
I'm sure the LDS might see this as sort of propaganda against them, but do you think they were trying to be accurate? And apart from the blacks not being allowed into the priesthood because of the curse, what about the other stuff? I really do not want to talk about the Blessed Virgin Mary in the way they just did because it makes me sick.
Yeah.
But is that what they taught at any point?
There were prophets who spoke and seemed to insinuate that the conception of Jesus was not done in a supernatural way.
Everyone look at my article on where God had sex with Mary in Mormonism. So, yeah. I'm actually going to pop.
And where is that article located at, Robert, for the audience?
I'll share in the notes. So, for instance, Trent Horn, when Protestants argue like atheists, finally both Catholics and Protestants need to be wary of citing theological opinion as if it were religion's official doctrine. For example, in 1909, the Mormon Church declared that the Father of Jesus is our Father also. Jesus, however, is the firstborn among all the sons of God, the first begotten of the Spirit, and the only begotten of the flesh. Some early Mormons took this to mean that Heavenly Father, whom Mormons believe is an exalted man with a physical body, had physical intercourse with the Virgin Mary. And then he quotes Brigham Young, said that Jesus was begotten of the Father as we were of our fathers. The problem, though, is for Trent, and it seems like Joe is parroting him, this is what he also said. On this account, infidels have called the Savior a bastard. This is merely a human opinion upon which the inscrutable doings of the Almighty, the very babe that was cradled in the manger was begotten not by Joseph, the husband of Mary, but by another being. Do you inquire by whom? He was begotten by God, our Heavenly Father. This answer may suffice you. You need never inquire more upon this point. Jesus Christ is the only begotten of the Father, and he's the Savior of the world, and full of grace and truth. That's the rest of the quote. And as I say, note that Brigham denies knowledge of the mechanics of the conception of Jesus. He only affirms that the source of the humanity of Jesus is the Father. Because the Holy Spirit cannot be the source of Jesus's... Mary cannot be the source of Jesus' humanity on her own. It would mean that Jesus was a clone of Mary. So you have some arguing, well, the Holy Spirit ex nihilo created half of Jesus's DNA and other stuff like that. So also another one from Brigham Young, not that Trent in his book quoted this one, but this is popular. The birth of the Savior was as natural as the births of her children. It was a result of natural actions. He partook of flesh and blood, was begotten of his father, as we were of our fathers. And, you know, it might surprise the author of this piece that there is a 9-month difference between the birth of a person and their conception. You know, so I'll actually share the link though with the full treatment. You know, it's from 2017. It's entitled Refutation of Mormonism Says God Impregnated Mary by Sex. So, but yeah. But, you know, does Joe actually know this or acknowledge this? But by the way, Barry Bickmore, in his response to 2 books by Catholic Answers from 1999, has a very good discussion about this as well. So you would think, like, at least he would be familiar with, like, say, that LDS response to Catholic Answers. Nope.
Insinuate.
Well, Brigham Young talks about how Jesus was conceived by the Father, not by the Holy Spirit.
But that in itself doesn't seem like a carnal union.
But in context, he seems to be saying there's a carnal union. It wasn't just the divine overshadowing that Luke talks about.
Where he says he doesn't know the mechanics.
Luke 1. And so you have things like this. Now, I think to steelman the Mormon response, they would say this is full of half-truths and things that maybe somebody said one thing, but they're presenting as official doctrine and it's not official doctrine. That might be true. I will defer to Mormons for which things they would.
Now, if only you were to do that, honestly, inconsistently for other things, you know, but, you know.
Say we're officially taught as doctrine, which is at a lower level of authority.
Every other thing they talk about.
Yeah.
Of the problem. That these are grotesque blasphemies being taught by LDS prophets that should be a reason to question the validity of their status as prophets. Even if you say they didn't bind anyone.
Okay.
They're blasphemies for a Catholic.
Yeah. Okay. Here's the post. Today, Roman Catholicism teaches everyone is ensouled at the moment of conception. However, historically, until like maybe a century ago, there was what's called delayed ensoulment. That is, with the exception of Jesus, and only the exception of Jesus, there's a delay between, like, say, the fertilization of an egg and ensoulment. You even see this in 1854, where Pius IX, when he defines the Immaculate Conception, says that Mary, at the first moment of her passive conception, you know, was immaculately conceived. Because he, without actually addressing it one way or another, say, he did, like, subscribe to the idea, like, say, there was a delayed ensoulment even for Mary. Practically every single Roman Catholic theologian, East and West, held to that, except maybe Maximus the Confessor, who believed everyone was conceived at the moment of conception. So much so, you actually have what's called the Roman Ritual of Pope Paul V, who was promulgated by the Apostolic Constitution Apostolic Sede, June 17th, 1614. Here's the Latin, here's the English translation. Now, for context, a monster in this case is like a premature child who kind of looks very deformed and kind of lacks a lot of human characteristics. So what happens if you actually find this? But in the case of monsters to be baptized, if the occasion rises, great caution will be exercised. If needed, local ordinary or other experts should be consulted unless there is immediate danger of death. So, and also, a monster that does not exhibit the human form should not be baptized. So it could be living and breathing, but if it looks kind of unhuman, it should not be baptized. However, if there is any doubt regarding this, it should be baptized under the following condition. If you're a human, I baptize you, etc. So this could have resulted in, like, say, loads of monsters who were actually alive, not receiving the grace of baptism. And in historic Roman Catholic theology, if you die without the grace of baptism and you still die with original sin in your soul, you don't go to heaven. That's why there's the limbo of the fathers, which was held until like Benedict XVI seemed to like quash that belief, where you're in hell, but you're not suffering like the pains or torments of hell. You're just suffering eternal detachment from God or separation from God. So it's like a very neutral place of, it's basically where Peter says like his wife will go when she dies in Family Guy. Like, you love all those dead kids, Lewis. But as I note here, at the time, the predominant view of the Roman Catholic religion was that of delayed ensoulment, with Christ as an exception. And as the sacrament of baptism is the ordinary means of regeneration, and being translated from being a son of Adam to a son of Christ, the ritual promulgated by Paul V, who was a pope, in the Catholic view, has probably condemned many infants to hell, and if anyone claims unbaptized infants without exception will go to heaven, in Catholic theology, that's 1, false, and 2, Pelagian. So, yeah. Was that a false and damnable belief that was basically a universal teaching of the church? And let's face it, like, it was taught almost unanimously by the theologians. And guess which catechism teaches it? The Catechism of the Council of Trent from 1566. Which kind of shows, like, Joe wanting LDS catechisms to understand what they believe. Well, even your catechisms are not irreformable, because that catechism also taught geocentrism, and you're not Robertson Jonas. So, if LDS leaders did teach something that is like false and disgusting, and I don't believe they did, see the article, but in arguments, so let's just say they did, equal weights and measures. In fact, this is more problematic because this kind of goes against indefectibility. Because, as I said, most Catholic theology is actually part of what's called ordinary universal magisterium. Basically the day-to-day authoritative teachings of the Pope, magisterium, councils, theologians, and so forth. This was the unanimous consensus of the theologians and moral consensus in the East and West throughout the ages. It's taught in the Catechism of the Council of Trent. It's taught by theologians. It was taught by the ordinary universal magisterium. And apparently that's not an infallible teaching of the church. We can go into like how someone in 1800 would know that, the epistemological basis by which we actually know it's infallible or not. But your church was teaching basically something that's damnable or potentially damnable for many souls who died as monsters. No. So, yeah, what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Else to hold it. If they believe these abominable things about God, about Mary, about Jesus, like where do you draw the line to say, like, okay, a true prophet of God wouldn't be making these kind of false claims because they're just incompatible with having a knowledge of God?
What else was taught in that?
Oh, there's a star-based collab things, calling it a star-based, you might say it's loading the deck, but you do have these things where it also, the presence of American Indians being Israelites, that is certainly something that the LDS believe, and it's certainly something that genetics has disproven. Like, they're not descended from.
Yeah. We believe that they're the house of Israel, but doesn't mean genetics and genealogy are one and the same. And we believe like they were like a small number of Israelites going into like a larger pre-existing population. And that's not like a new apologetic because of DNA studies. That's been around for like the turn of the 20th century at least. And also genetics actually will blow up in your face because the Fourth Lateran Council and other teachings go against polygenesis. You can't believe in polygenesis as a Catholic. You have Pius XII teaching that. You also have the Fourth Lateran dogmatically teaching it. But genetics doesn't really support, like, say, the traditional Catholic view of origins as well. But let's kind of ignore that, shall we?
Lay that out. This is pretty wild.
Yeah, so 19th century literature talks about how some of the lost tribes of Israel came to the Americas. Now, this gets the lost tribes of Israel wrong in the first place, but the 10 northern tribes, they are destroyed with the conquest of Samaria. And so there's all of this kind of apocryphal literature at the time imagining what happened to these lost tribes. And so one of the views is that some of these Israelites had fled and had gone to the New World, to the Americas. They're fun. At the same time, you have like cowboy and Indian stories and everything else. The American frontier is ripe with kind of imagination. And Joseph Smith, his mother talks about how much he liked to tell stories about cowboys and Indians.
Oh, for freak's sake, he uses the story again. That is in the context of Joseph actually having the visions of Moroni initially. It comes from a believer. It comes from 1845. There's loads of, for freak's sake, I can't believe he's actually doing this. Not Colby Townsend. Who was the guy that Stephen Murphy had on the channel recently discussing the Book of Mormon? I refuted him, Isaiah.
Colby Reddish?
Yeah,
that's
I didn't know I was on mute. Colby Reddish, yeah.
Yeah, Stephen Smith has done this. I mean, this is a quote mine. This is from a believer. This is in the context of Joseph actually receiving the revelation of the Book of Mormon. And also, funny enough, like if you read like his mother's account, like what he was sharing, none of that appears in the Book of Mormon. And it also comes from 1845. So,
that kind of stuff. So he likes to imagine this sort of thing, and then suddenly just has a revelation like, oh yeah, that thing you dreamt up is totally true, and that's exactly how it happened. And
no.
Oh yeah.
Again,
at least they didn't do the Dartmouth theory.
we'll see. There's still like 10 minutes left.
It looks suspiciously like several other works at the time. So we know genetically.
No, it doesn't. For instance, I'm going to say View of the Hebrews. Show me one, because View of the Hebrews has an entire chapter, like say, evidences and proofs that the American Indians are Israelites, like share Hebrew terms and other cultural considerations. Not a single one appears in the Book of Mormon. Yeah. At the best, as in like Vogel and Metcalf, who unlike this clown has actually read the Book of Mormon and these sources, and as much as I disagree with him, I have more respect for them than Joe here, would say like both the Book of Mormon and View of the Hebrews and other sources are bringing the same air, if you will, of the 19th century in terms of say speculations. But it's not similar. I mean, have you actually read View of the Hebrews? Have you read like Elias Boudinot's book? Have you read any of the purported sources like Tanners and others over the years have claimed to be influential on the Book of Mormon? I have. You know. By the way, shout out to Stephen Smith, who did a great job on the View of the Hebrews, Ian Smith issue on the Mormon Order website. I think he's going to be writing a book based on this, which is great.
False. So we have a better understanding of where the American Indians come from now, and we know about like the crossing of the Bering Strait. We know, you can do genetic tracing and all of this stuff now. The core claims of how you get these different tribes like the Nephites in the New World, we now know these just to be false, like indefensibly false. So I don't know how one can hear all of that. Those aren't like morally problematic claims. They're just the core claims of the Book of Mormon.
Tell me you have not kept up with Book of Mormon scholarship for the last century. Literally, century.
Are wrong about why these tribes are here in the first place. These tribes didn't exist, and the tribes that did exist were not Israelites.
Finn, do we have any more, or is that the last video?
Ignores HLA, DNA, and other considerations, but yeah.
Oh, we got another one here. As America celebrates 250 years this year, but Good Ranchers family eats.
And that part of Jesus is material. We would agree that.
For $25 off on top of the $500 annual savings when you subscribe. GoodRanchers.com. American meat delivered.
You probably would agree that.
Okay, this is Hayden. Shout out to Hayden if he ever watches this. Yeah.
He didn't have his body before he was born, right?
Yeah, I don't think he has.
And that part of Jesus is material, which causes some issues. Because if God is immaterial and Jesus is God, then what do you do with Jesus' body? Right? Jesus is fully God today, right?
Yes.
And is God material or immaterial?
By the way, I'm not sure if this comes out, but like in Catholic theology, and you see this in the Council of Chalcedon, and it's also tied intimately to the theology of the Mass, Christ remains the God-man eternally. He will always have his body. So.
Okay.
Oh, by the way, that's not a gotcha against Catholics. It's just like that. It's just like what Catholic theology teaches dogmatically. Like Jesus, practically everyone believes Jesus remains embodied, as the perfect God-man. So.
All right, so you correct me if I'm wrong, but what I think he's trying to do here is respond to the objection to the claim by the LDS that the Father has a body by saying, look, you basically believe the same thing. You don't have a problem with Jesus having a body. Jesus is God, so it's really not that weird. Is that what he's saying?
I'm not 100% sure what he's trying to do. There's certainly no contradiction between saying Jesus, in as much as he is God, is immaterial, and in as much as he is man, is embodied.
So why can't the Mormons say the same thing about the Father, Heavenly Father?
Well, because in this case, Jesus creates, the whole cosmos is brought into being through Jesus, as we read in the New Testament. Jesus then enters into his.
Well, actually, Jesus is the passive agent of creation. If you read Colossians, it's the Father who's the active agent, who works through the Son. That's Colossians 1. That's also Revelation 4, where it's the Father spoken of in the active vice, but the Son is spoken about in the passive in Colossians. And of course, Colossians is borrowed from like wisdom literature, where God creates through wisdom. Psalm 33, 32 in the Septuagint. There's other considerations. For those who want more, look at my response to Jeff Durbin on Mormonism, where I discuss some of the nuances of the Greek of Colossians 1, 15 to 20.
On creation, and takes a body which he did not have before. In his divinity, remains unchanged, but something is united to his divinity, a full human nature. That's a change in one sense, not in his divinity, but a change in the order of created reality. There's no reason logically God the Father couldn't have done the same thing if he wanted to go get a body. He could have done it. He could have become incarnate.
Aquinas makes this argument assuming not the Father specifically, but different members of the Trinity, or even the second person of the Trinity, maybe not the second person, but certainly one of them of the Trinity could become incarnate.
Yeah, second person of the Trinity did become incarnate.
Yeah, but I mean again.
Oh, I see.
I'm not sure if that's what Aquinas says, but certainly makes the claim the Father could have become incarnate.
Right, the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, and here's the thing, there's nothing problematic with, say, God, the Father, even in, Thomistic theology, hypothetically, in eternal past, outside of time, being the one to incarnate. But it was chosen using, such language because, of course, outside of time, ADS and all that jazz, for it to be the second person of the Trinity. Of course, there were, other issues as well. For instance, if I were in Joe's shoes, and perhaps he discusses, how in LDS theology, there's no such thing as, immaterial matter and other considerations as well. So, even a spirit is a body in that respect.
Could have taken on bodies. Well, the argument is
I've
not
got a question real quick, Robert. This isn't a gotcha towards Catholics. I legitimately don't know. Does Catholicism, do they teach that, because God is immaterial and omnipresent, is God the Father, in our presence right now, even though the four of us are in separate geographic locations?
Yes.
Okay, so how would they make sense of Jesus telling Mary Magdalene, touch me not, for I have not ascended to my Father? Because wouldn't that imply that the God the Father has a fixed location?
No, they would just say he's using just ordinary day-to-day language,
Like an anthropomorphism.
Yeah, anthropomorphism. Yeah.
Okay, of course they would.
Incarnation or hypostatic union. The argument is, if you're saying God was embodied on another planet, this raises all sorts of theological and historical questions. Does he have human power?
Jesus was embodied on a planet. I'm sorry. Try to be consistent in your Christology when you argue against Latter-day Saint theology.
For instance, does he have his own God? Those are the issues. It's not a question of what.
Did Jesus have his own God and during the incarnate? Oh yeah, he did. Hebrews 1, John 20, a bunch of other texts that say that Christ has a God, and even not just in mortality, but even after his exaltation, per the use of Psalm 45 and Hebrews 1, 8 to 9. Inconsistency is a sign of a failed argument. I'm sorry, Really? I mean, you again, nuance things. I mean, there is a way to argue this from a Roman Catholic perspective, but come on, nuance this and show you I've actually are trying to be consistent
I
and
would
fair
like
here.
one steel man and then the nuance, at least somewhere.
So you could be fully God and fully man and at the same time. Like that should be an area that certainly a Christian wouldn't object to.
Destroyed.
Nope.
All right, let's wrap this up. I think it's really important that Catholics, at least some of them who are watching right now, maybe dedicate their life to responding to Mormon claims, especially because
Well, if they do, read a damn book and show intellectual honesty. Basically, what Joe does, but the opposite.
interview, we were talking about the fact that they're so amorphous. And so it's quite difficult to understand what the LDS is saying. I was always of the opinion that if you go back to the source, show that those claims by early prophets were demonstrably...
By the way, if you do this for Roman Catholicism, you'll get the same response. Seriously.
false, that would be enough. But as we talked about, they're perfectly willing to say nobody's infallible and the scriptures aren't inerrant, which kind of makes it very difficult to argue. So I'd love you to talk about that, but I'd also love to get your advice. So what would your advice be to people who are doing maybe online apologetics or they're engaging with their Mormon friends? What should they be thinking about? How should they approach these interactions?
I think the first thing is to present the truth.
Don't do what I do, is what he should say. Sorry.
Yeah. This is just Joe being humble. I was like, well, present in truth. It's like, one, you show love by being honest. You're not honest, Joe. Let's just be honest. This is just boundary maintenance, and damn well that's the case. And two, I would be absolutely ashamed if I were to argue, as I have on my blog and elsewhere, against Catholicism and produce the same level of absolute BS. This is just like a grade or two above Ian Hislop type of material when it comes to the Roman Catholicism. It's that atrocious.
May have gotten things wrong even in the course of this. Anytime you're trying to critique anyone else's belief system at all, the first danger is, am I understanding the belief system well enough? And as you said, that's
Obviously you don't, but that doesn't stop you, Joe.
very tricky to do with Mormonism. It's very tricky to do with Mormonism for a lot of reasons, not least of which...
It's very tricky to do it with Catholicism, because you can go through an entire catechism, even of Trent, and kind of show there's certain teachings that are not considered binding or authoritative anymore, like delayed installment. And you can go say through papal encyclicals and so forth, but you don't have what is the tool? What is the epistemological basis by which you can sift through that boring piece of crap called papal encyclicals? And there's volumes and volumes of them, and tell them which ones are the binding teachings and which ones are not binding teachings. And if it's a case say, well, one day the church will tell you, it's like, okay, I have to wait for an ecumenical council or extraordinary teaching from the Pope to understand, say, these things.
But Journal of Discourse is, and if it was said from a pulpit somewhere, but anyway, man.
Yeah. Again, if you were to apply these standards to Roman Catholicism, it would be game over for Roman Catholicism.
That's right.
But again, this is not the attitude of all Roman Catholics, but many Roman Catholics. As long as it is done in defense of Mother Rome, it doesn't matter.
Is that it's evolving, and there can be a revelation at the drop of a hat. I mean, there isn't often, but there can be. And people can have radically different understandings of these same doctrines. So making sure you understand what the other
radically understand the different doctrines. I mean, Father James Martin is very good friends with the late Pope Frankie and also Leo. What does he think about solemnized same-sex unions and other things like that? What about the various debates even today about topics like predestination? The church was basically split apart in, not by the Calvinists, but internal debates about Thomism and Scotism and other issues as well. What about say whether Mary was immaculately conceived? You have the majority of medieval theologians like Bernard et al., including Aquinas, reject the Immaculate Conception. But today it's de fide dogma. What about that? What about the other debates all throughout ecclesiastical history? What about delayed installment?
Person is saying is a very good first step. And approaching them with the spirit of charity. You want the best for them. You're not there to make...
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just saying schism after schism after schism.
Yeah.
Fun of Mormonism. You're not there to make fun of these beliefs that have been the guiding principles of their life. You're there to show that God, the God they're trying to follow, actually wants something more for them, and that this is very good news. And if you do it with that spirit of charity and love for them, I hope that's what comes through. Now,
honestly, I've been very critical of Joe, so I won't answer. But you guys just watching this, has Joe actually shown love and charity and understanding in this or his other interactions with Latter-day Saints recently?
Not the ones I've seen. Jacob Hansen has said, aside from the apologetics, he's a good guy. I have to believe that because I haven't been in his presence, right? But when he does this, it ain't it. And this is what the public sees. And this is where he's like, oh, have charity. Watch the God Makers cartoon. Like, come on. Come on. And this looks like they meant to have some kind of like fireside chat or something, or two guys shooting a breeze or something. I don't know, but they didn't give any evidence. They just pulled up some TikToks and the God Makers. It's silly. This is not serious. You can't call what this was charitable by any stretch.
Yeah, this is a charitable as being saying, like, say, Catholics are cannibals because of their belief in transubstantiation.
Right.
It's a damn lie.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I said this earlier in the stream. Like, I'll give Joe credit for sitting down with Luke Hansen and for getting into the arena with Jacob Hansen, but like this kind of video is it's just worthless, really.
It's like those conversations never actually took place. Yeah. Let's continue. We only have like 3.5 minutes left.
To Mormons who are watching, I would say number one, be patient with the fact that non-Mormons trying to understand Mormonism are going to struggle, and we're going to make mistakes, we're going to mispronounce words, we're going to get details wrong. All of that's going to be true.
Oh, it's not a case like, say, innocent mistakes or stuff like that. This is willful deception on your behalf, Joe. Really is.
And two, I would say don't get caught up in was it technically the highest level of official doctrine or not? If you get to a place where you can say, yes, many of our
apply that to Roman Catholicism when it comes to geocentrism, delayed installment, and the other beliefs that have been ignored, or continues to be debated today,
presidents taught things that were blasphemous, were false, for idolatry, the Adam God doctrine, these damnable kind of errors. Take that and read the writing on the wall and say, would God want you in a situation where the people ostensibly led by him, the presidents, the people who are allegedly prophets, are teaching damnable error, even in a slightly less than binding capacity? Or does he want something more from you? Do you believe in the goodness of God?
Like Honoris teaching mother tells them in the private letter to Sergius, like Virgil has been excommunicated, and these reversals about the 3 chapters doing a Christological controversy. That might, you might be hoping, like, say, the Latter-day Saint doesn't read for fun the acts of various councils, but BS, dude.
This is where Hayden Carroll, he actually put a super chat on their video. He was like, how many heretics did you burn at the stake? So, I mean, and what were the heretics for? For not believing things that come about after they didn't need to be believed for salvation for so long. Some of the things you're talking about, right? If you're going to talk about the fallibility of leaders equals your church's inability to be true, you got to stare that one in the face. You look in the mirror. I don't get it. That one falls flat from a Catholic. I'm sorry. That's out of bounds. They don't get to use that one. It's just bad. Just really bad. We acknowledge fallibility. It's fine. We don't have a problem with certain mistakes. We have a problem with someone saying that they're mistakes because they don't align with Catholic doctrine. That's a fallacy. But don't sit there and be like, oh, these moral mistakes and whatever, when you don't even take the time to understand it. And there's clear, obvious historical documents. It's fact. It's well known. Everyone agrees to it, of many severe moral failings of popes, cardinals, priests by the thousands. I'm sorry. Don't use that one unless you want it used on you.
By the way, Star-Base Collab did mention something that he's correct. Matthew Harris, who's ex-LDS, he's written like a book on race, actually a couple books on race and LDS issues. He asked the Carter administration if there was an IRS threat against the church, and there wasn't. There was one against the Bob Jones University. So,
Right.
So I was just going to mention that because sometimes people say, "Oh, the church is
People say it was
tax
an
exempt
IRS
status."
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is popular but bogus. So
Right.
Well, it's similar to the claim that of the university protests. Like, there were universities like San Jose State and Wyoming who protested the church in some athletic events, but that was like in the late 60s. They had stopped doing that in the years leading up to the priesthood ban being lifted. Like, there's no like conspicuous pressure coming from the outside in those regards.
That's actually good evidence because we waited until the pressure alleviated. If we were doing it for social reasons, it would have happened mid to late 60s at the latest.
Yeah, and that's
Right.
and that's acknowledged by some critics as well. So, but yeah, let's kind of finish. We have 3 minutes left, so it's almost done, guys. It's almost done.
There is something.
Yeah, that's what was going to be my next question. No doubt we'll have many members of the LDS community watching these videos. What's your advice to someone who's sort of maybe nervous or on the fence or isn't sure what to do right now if they're beginning to think that LDS is false?
I would say don't be afraid of the truth. John Paul II in Fides et Ratio talks about faith and reason as the two wings upon which the human spirit rises. You will find people who pit faith against reason, who pit faith against philosophy. This is contrary to the goodness of God. God gave you a working brain. He gave you a mind. He gave you an intellect to know the truth, and it's nothing to run from. And if you find that the religious tradition in which you were raised is false, please be patient enough to realize this does not mean that God is false. It doesn't even mean that religion is false.
By the way, for Roman Catholics who realize, like, say, what their church teaches is blasphemous nonsense about Mary, the Mass, and other issues, that's actually good advice.
The fact that one person, lies to you doesn't mean all men are bad or all women are bad. Similarly, the fact that one religion is false doesn't mean that Christianity itself is false. And I know that can be a tall order. People have had an experience with a very institutional religion and they come away feeling like they were deceived and lied to, then they often want to give up on the whole thing. And that is unfortunately the case of many ex-Mormons. And I would say give historic Christianity a chance and listen to the claims that
When you say historic Christianity, of course, you mean Roman Catholicism, and maybe it's time to actually share this. I've been pretty good, but Joe, I will actually debate you on so-called historic Christianity. I've actually said this before. It's on YouTube. I'll be tagging you again on Monday. I will debate you on the thesis of whether the Immaculate Conception of Mary and her personal synthesis are apostolic in origin. According to Rome, once a de fide dogma, the other, according to Ott and others, is proximate to the faith. So, and I will give you 50% more time than me. So I'll get a 20-minute opening statement, you got 30, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, let's do it. I'll happily debate you on Mariology. And to straighten the deal, I'll debate you on the Book of Abraham immediately afterwards, and whether it's a 19th century document or for a translation of a ancient text or a 19th century forgery. I mean, if Mormonism is obviously false and Rome is obviously true, both debates should be like an absolute wipeout on your behalf.
Yeah, he should be able to just walk all over you without even thinking.
Yep.
Maybe you didn't grow up understanding and maybe feel very alien to you, and try to listen as much as you can with an open heart and see if there isn't something that has more integrity, that stands up more to the evaluation of both faith and reason.
Is there one book you might recommend somebody read?
Unfortunately, there's not a single great book that I know. I know the work of a lot of people that have been doing very good work. I keep trying to push Isaac Hess to write a book since he's got that background. But
Isaac Hess is an absolute idiot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He knows he'd get.
Oh, by the way, he pulls the whole fake, humble, I just want to share my story, but he's more than willing to dump on his former faith.
Mm-hmm.
He's been emailed to debate me, and he's pussied out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know of any.
Yeah, I mean, it would be one thing if Hess just kind of mentioned his former faith in the church, just kind of in passing, and didn't make a big deal about it. But he'll go on shows or podcasts and drone on and on about it for hours. It's like, well, if you're going to do that, you should debate and be willing to defend your ideas publicly. If you're unwilling to do that, what does that say about your content? Why are you afraid of scrutiny?
Everything, partly because there are a lot of moving parts. There are a lot of things that seem to be changing. So maybe a better book would be something in favor of historic Christianity. So read C.S. Lewis' Mere Christianity, read Ronald Knox's The Belief of Catholics, read the Catechism of the Catholic Church, and
yeah, definitely read the Catechism and read the Vatican II documents and read pre-Vatican II documents. That's all I'm going to say. That opened my eyes, especially in minute.
Try to understand, at the same level you'd want someone to understand Mormonism, if you're coming from a Mormon perspective, try to understand Trinitarian Christianity, where you're not just totally debunked it. Think about the fact that people smarter than you, wiser than you, maybe holier than you, have believed in this stuff. And have...
By the way, people smarter than you and holier than you actually believe the opposite, by the way. Again, this is just on being humble, bragging, and all that. We all know.
You can't just say that they're holier when someone doesn't have a basis of faith for that. Just say many people who have, oh my gosh, many people who have walked in a Christ-like manner throughout their lives, humbly and reverently, or something like that. That's what you. Why are you saying smarter and holier? Oy.
Myth. See what they saw in it, and see if that doesn't change your perspective.
Joe Heschmeyer, thanks for being on the show.
My pleasure.
By the way, Joe,
I actually just gave Joe a really good hint right there. He can take that and keep using it. That's free of charge, Joe. If you see this. Don't be proudful in your proclamations like that. Jeez. Sorry.
Yeah, by the way, Joe, if I want a book on, say, the beliefs of the, say, the first 2 centuries on, the proof of the assumption as a apostolic teaching or icon veneration and stuff like that, where do I go to? Because they're de fide. I remember, and Robert Sangenis has said this, and he's correct. For Roman Catholicism, it's all or nothing. If Rome is wrong about, even the assumption of Mary, they might just be wrong about, say, the Christological doctrines and dogmas as well, because it's all or nothing when it comes to, say, indefectibility and infallibility. But yeah, that was torturous, and that lasted for 3 hours, which I will not. I have limited time these days, and I'm not going to get that one back.
I'm sorry, man.
I don't know if, based on the experience, you'd have any interest, Robert, but do you plan on reacting to his sit down with Luke Hansen? Like
the Adam God one?
Yeah.
Maybe if I have Luke Hansen on. Sometimes Luke has popped onto like my live streams, so maybe. I mean, I think it's obvious, but like, I'm not sure if we still have that plan. But like, once Smoot finishes his dissertation, we were talking about maybe doing like a monograph on early LDS Christology, and then after that, I'd kind of finally write a book or two on Adam God. So,
Which you should.
Yeah, we should. But like, I remember like doing it, and Josh, my boss at the time, said like because our editor said like, do we have to go into like all this detail? And it's like, well, you know, when it comes to these topics, you either have zero interest in them or you have autism. And to write a book on this, you need super autism. Yeah.
Fair.
But yeah, at least I know like some people will actually, when that happens, at least for the Adam God one, like I'll get Jacob Vidrine and a couple others from different perspectives to actually go through it, because as much as I disagree with Jacob Vidrine on it, he's a very good documents hound, and others as well. So yeah, we'll see. Someone says like they wish they plugged Kyle Bashir's book. Mention this not because I'm a fan of it, but hopefully myself and Blake will be joining Jacob on his channel to review this book. Sometime,
hopefully, maybe. Yeah, I'm gonna get back to Blake. I messaged him last week. He was gonna think about it, so I'll have to message him again. Maybe if you're in his ear too, he'll be more apt to do it. If he doesn't want to do it, that's fine. I don't want to pressure him and do it or anything. But I have seen him on with David Snell. He's been on a couple other channels that are Protestant evangelicals talking about his book. I think it would be good to have a review from Latter-day Saints that is a little bit more where we can actually talk about a few things that I think he may get wrong. And
he to be fair, he got a lot wrong. And by the way, that's not personal animus against the guy. Like, I've talked to him in person, and he seems like a good guy, but the book was disappointment. So yeah.
Yeah, I posted on Instagram when I picked up the book that I was reading it and that I was thinking about maybe doing a review of it. And he commented on that, and I don't know him personally. I've never really interacted with him. He seems like a genuine person, a genuinely kind person. So, you know, for whatever that's worth, I do think it would be helpful to have a more thorough review of the book from a perspective like yourself or Blake, hopefully the both of you, where you can actually go through specific ideas that he presents in the book and where he goes wrong. Because I think the first maybe third of the book, I don't have too much to say about it really. I could quibble about a few really nitpicky things here and there. But once you get into that second half of the book, there's quite a few things. And I just haven't seen anybody really give a solid review of the book yet. I'm sure that's coming, but
well, hopefully. But you know, if you can rope Blake into it, like, I'll happily join you guys, because I do have some of criticisms as well. But he'd be very good for like because it seems like Carl did deliberately ignore Blake on a host of other issues. Now, let's just say in arguments who Blake is in La La Land when it comes to his interpretation of the kinfold of discourse, he has written the article, not just the LDS article, the article on Cratio ex nihilo and Cratio ex materia. So much so it's even being quoted favorably by like Tom Ord and others. So to avoid it and just say like Romans 4:17 teaches creation out of nothing, and just assume that's the case uncritically, it's like that was disappointing. And a lot of the stuff is basically just assuming, like, throw the proof text, assume the common Reformed Protestant reading is true, and that's the end of that on justification.
Right. Yeah. There's no support.
Christology.
He provides no support for why a Protestant or someone in his theological framework would apply or interpret those scriptures the way that he does. It's just assumed.
Yeah, there's no historical grammatical interpretation of any text in the book. Now I know like it was written for Protestants, but at the same time, you would at least expect some attempt at exegesis of some of the important texts or some of the more difficult texts for either the LDS perspective or the non-LDS perspective. So,
yeah, and just for the comments, Starbase Collab, I did watch David Snell's interview with him, and David always does a really good job with his interviews. I do think that the interview didn't touch on some of the things that I think could have with respect to the theology presented by Kyle in his book. So that's really where I think a review is needed. The interview with David and Kyle was good as always. You can always expect David to do a good job when he interviews people from whatever faith background. It's just in his nature to be a very charitable human being and do some of his homework. And so, yeah, I mean, it was a good interview. I agree. But there needs to be a deeper treatment of Kyle's book and actually pinpoint specific things that he discusses and where I think he goes wrong.
Well, I'd be down for it because like I do have like loads of markings.
Yeah,
so.
You really went on it. I think it was funny because you were like, oh, okay, like I think he's going to do a good job, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I'm pulling my hair out, and I'm
I mean, like the first few chapters is like, okay, there's some problems, but like it's not too bad. It's much better than like say some of the crap that's out there. He doesn't believe Joseph Smith was the author of the Book of Mormon. That's interesting. Doesn't really interact well with Book of Mormon or Book of Abraham evidences. It's kind of disappointing, especially I know Smoot reviewed the chapter on the Book of Abraham, but who knows? And then the second half on theology is like, it was torturous to read.
Mm-hmm.
It really was. Yeah. But yeah, we've been at this for like 3 hours. So yeah, hopefully this has been useful. And thanks guys for like tuning in, and hopefully it hasn't been too much of a waste of your Friday. So yeah, and hopefully
it wasn't a waste at all. I was glad to be here, Robert. Thanks.
Yeah, and hopefully like the review I have tomorrow with Chandler will be much better and less will not incite me too much to pull out my hair. So. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, and hopefully I'll catch you guys later. So enjoy your weekend.